Chapter 257. With Jianghai's agreement, Walton couldn't help but smile. She immediately pulled Selena Gomez, who was still a little unsure, towards Jianghai's villa. But just as they opened the door of the villa, they saw Delina and Marian. This pair of beautiful little girls were sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching TV. Unlike other 14 or 15-year-old girls, this pair of little girls usually didn't have many friends. Their previous life made them not very interested in the internet. Compared to playing online, they were more willing to sit in front of the TV and watch paid channels. Their favorite program was talent shows, such as ABC TV's Dancing with the Stars, NBC TV's America's Got Talent, Fox TV's American Idol, and even CW's America's Top Model. Compared to the American TV series that Jianghai likes to watch, they were very ordinary. At this time, they were sitting there watching America's Top Model, which Jianghai has also watched before. But to be honest, Jianghai didn't care much about this program. Although he liked to watch beautiful women, most of the supermodels were, ordinary. Their figures were great, but they were too thin. As for their faces, it was just a so-so. Although Jianghai wasn't completely obsessed with looks, when a man looks at a woman, the first thing he looks at is the face, then the figure. As for clothes, it doesn't matter. At least Jianghai didn't have such taste. When Walton walked into the room, her eyes lit up as soon as she saw Delina and Marian. Wow, what two cute little girls, are you twins? Why are you so beautiful, do you want to come to my house to play? As soon as she saw the two girls, she showed her most powerful excitement, scaring the two girls. They looked at her with some horror, unconsciously moving to the sofa next to them. These are my two girls, Delina and Marian, this is your Aunt Walton, and Selena Gomez, aunt? Or sister? Looking at the appearance of the two girls and Walton, Jianghai immediately took a few steps forward and came to the side of the three people, temporarily attracting their attention. You have to call her sister. Sister, do you understand? This is also my elder sister. Walton's face darkened when she heard the words, Jianghai's auntie. She never thought that she was old, but this guy actually called her auntie? Alright, it's elder sister. Alright, you guys go back to your room and read your books. I'll bring your two elder sisters to see their rooms. They'll be staying with us for a while. It could be seen that Daliana and Marian were still wary of strangers, so Jianghai stepped forward to mediate the situation. Upon hearing Jianghai's words, Daliana and Marian immediately stood up and bowed to the two people in front of them. Then, they quickly ran to the second floor. Looking at the two escaping figures, Walton's expression made Jianghai feel that it was a pity. Go upstairs. Since you're not afraid that I'll have any bad intentions, you can stay in the guest rooms upstairs. I don't have any guest rooms specially built for guests. The other workers' rooms are standalone villas, and they are already occupied. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jianghai shrugged. At the same time, he made up his mind to try his best not to let Delina and Marian be alone with this guy in the future. That's troublesome. But fortunately, when Delina and Marian weren't around, Walton didn't act like that. It was as if she had instantly restored her original aura of a queen. She just nodded to Jianghai faintly. Then, Jianghai brought the two people to the second floor and opened the two guest rooms furthest away from him. Usually, Aphrodite and Marian would come over to clean the guest rooms, so the guest rooms weren't dirty now. Looking at the guest rooms in front of them, the two were actually quite satisfied. Actually, we can stay in the same room. Looking at the big bed in the guest room, Walton muttered in a low voice. I'll go change first, see you later. But as soon as she heard her words, Selena Gomez jumped up immediately, nodded gently to Jianghai, then immediately walked into the other room and locked the door. Looking at her appearance, Walton couldn't help but smile. Interesting. As her voice fell, she walked straight into the room and closed the door. For a while, Jianghai, who brought them here, became the most awkward person. He really didn't know whether to leave or stay. But Jianghai's awkwardness only lasted for a while, He gave up, turned around and walked back to the first floor. He needed to calm down. These two women said that they wanted to play in his manor. As the host, and one of the two may be his partner, Jianghu also thought about what to play in his manor. Riding, going to sea, fishing, hanging out on the beach, that's probably it. Now the weather here is not very hot, the water probably can't go down. Jianghu felt cold when he went down. These people probably can't go down, so it's almost the only thing to play. If they want to go to the forest or something like that, they also have a forest here. It doesn't matter if they want to play in it. Just as Jianghu was thinking about what to play there, the two women upstairs had changed their clothes and walked down again. However, the so-called change of clothes was just changing their originally fashionable clothes into some loose clothes. That was all. Let's go. As soon as they went downstairs, Walton said with a smile. Oh, okay, but where do you want to go? Hearing this person's words, Jianghu also stood up and asked them. The beach, what else do you have to play here besides the beach? Hearing Jianghu's words, Walton gently twirled her hair with her fingers and looked at Jianghu with a little surprise. There are a lot of things to play. You can ride horses, go to sea, fish, but you can go to the forest to burn guns, and most importantly, you can see the cows. Hearing Walton's words, Jianghu couldn't help but look at her. I always feel that today's Walton is a little different from the iceberg lady I saw before. Why is she crazy, and a little chinibu? This doesn't fit the image of her in my heart. Then let's go to the beach first. Ignoring the ridicule in Jianghu's eyes, Walton said with certainty. Since she has already said so, Selena Gomez has no opinion. In fact, this time she was dragged here. She doesn't care about what to play. For a star like her, a female tycoon like Walton, what hasn't she played before? Does she really care about Jianghu's broken manor? They came here to kill time and relax, that's all. As for work and the like, it's secondary. Okay. Since it has been decided, Jianghu did not refute. After walking out of the villa with the two, Jianghu drove a four-wheeled motorcycle, and the two here also drove one in front and one behind, along the road paved in Jianghu's manor, toward the beach. But it didn't take long for Walton to overtake them. Where is that? Pointing to a small manor on the left of Jianghu, Walton couldn't help but ask. That's a wine manor. Glancing at the manor over there, Jianghu couldn't help but say. Do you still have red wine here? Walton's eyes lit up when she heard Jianghu's words. Yes, but it hasn't started brewing yet. It's still in the planting stage. Hearing her words, Jianghu also nodded. He planted these grapes, naturally, to make wine and sell them. Of course, if it tastes good, he will also stay and drink it. It's really a good life. Hearing Jianghu's words, Walton couldn't help but curl her lips. She accelerated and overtook Jianghu, heading toward the wine manor in the distance. Jianghu had to change his route and followed her to the winery. When Jianghu and the others arrived, the head of the winery, Dulce Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements of the grapevine to Aphrodite and the others. For those who grew plants, pruning was essential. When pruning the branches, you need to pay attention to it. Don't cut the head, but cut the other side branches. This way, the nutrients won't be absorbed by the other side branches. More nutrients will be supplied to the main grapes. When Jianghu and the others arrived, the head of Jianghu's winery, Dulce Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements to Aphrodite and the others. Because if left alone, these grapes will grow into a bunch of grapes on each branch, but the nutrients that the earth can give are limited, especially when Jianghu does not allow pesticides and fertilizers. If a bunch of grapevines grows dozens of bunches of grapes, then most of the grapes will not be able to grow. Not only does this consume time, but it also consumes a lot of the fertility of the land, so whether it is planting grapes or vegetables. These old people all have a way to distinguish which are the main places to grow and which are not. If they are not the main branches, they must be pruned to ensure the supply of nutrients to the main branches. This is the inevitable effect of planting grapes. And Aphrodite Arnold, Dinah Taylor, and the others also listened very seriously. Ever since Jianghai's rebirth, these women's feelings for Jianghai are slowly fermenting, especially under Aphrodite's bewitchment. Almost all of these women's dream lover looks like Jianghai. Chapter 258. Maybe it was because of the principles of education they had received before, or maybe it was because they had a good impression of Jianghai. In their opinion, Jianghai was so good to them that they had no other choice but to give themselves to him. But a few days ago, when they deliberately wanted to give the most important thing they had regained to Jianghai, Jianghai did not want it. This made these girls feel a little sad, but at the same time, they felt that they had not misjudged him. As Jianghai began to focus more of his attention on the herd of cows, they also temporarily extinguished such thoughts. Of course, if possible, they were still willing to give themselves to Jianghai. But when Jianghai did not want them, their main job was to learn how to grow wine and how to make it. Dulles Gerard was also very happy to have a group of beautiful, studious, and beautiful apprentices. So recently, he had been teaching very hard. It could be said that he had taught them everything he knew. This made O'Connor Murphy, who was his assistant, a little confused. When O'Connor was learning skills, 90% of the time, he was secretly learning from others. In this way, Dulles Gerard was still unwilling to teach some things, but he was very happy to teach these girls. But as a German, his spirit was extremely tenacious. He did not show any fluctuations. Instead, he continued to do his work strictly and seriously. Just as Dulles Gerard was teaching these girls, Jianghai and Pra Walton's four-wheeled motorcycle also drove to the side of the winery. The movement of the motorcycle attracted everyone's attention. When they saw that Jianghai had come, the girls who were still surrounding Dulles Gerard immediately stood up and rushed to Jianghai's side. As for Pra Walton and Selena Gomez, they were temporarily ignored. They did not care about the women around Jianghai. If there was a need, they could help Jianghai find them. You are amazing. There are so many beauties here. Is your winery really used for making wine? Looking at these youthful beauties, Pra Walton's eyes suddenly lit up. She looked at Jianghai with surprise, but her eyes kept glancing at these girls. She had to admit that the quality of these girls was definitely very high in her opinion. They were quite good-looking, and it could be said that none of them were ugly. In addition, after being transformed by Jianghai's spirit energy, they had white and delicate skin and big watery eyes. Because of the labor, their bodies had become tighter and tighter. As soon as they walked over, they gave off a very healthy sense of beauty. The most important thing was that Jianghai had repaired their bodies. So now, their bodies were so healthy that Pra Walton could not take her eyes off of them. Of course, it's for making wine. These girls have some very bad pasts, but they have been reborn with me. Hearing Pra Walton's words, Jianghai glanced at her. He was a gentleman, and he had never touched these girls. It's too wasteful. Beauties, we are going to the beach to play. Do you want to come with us? Looking at these girls in front of her, Pra Walton's expression changed and said with envy. However, when the girls heard that they were going to play, they first glanced at Jianghai. Seeing Jianghai's indifferent look, the girls also looked at Dulles Gerard. The old man was soon defeated by the girls' eyes. He could not help but clap his hands and stand up. You have learned enough these days. Take half a day off. Tomorrow, you will start pruning the branches. Hearing Dulles Gerard's words, the girls could not help but laugh silently. Then, they high-fived each other and looked at Jianghai with longing. Then go back and change your clothes. You can come by yourself later. You can drive that F-750. Looking at the girls' longing eyes, Jianghai also smiled. He would not stop the girls from coming to play, especially when they were not too busy. As long as they could do their job, Jianghai was still very good to his subordinates. Hearing Jianghai's words, the girls cheered silently. Although they could now speak very slowly like Delina and Marian, in order not to appear too sudden, Jianghai only told the people in the manner that he was treating these girls, but he did not say the specific extent of the treatment. At least, he would only show it after some time. After all, this kind of medical skill is really a little scary. If it is exposed, it will not be good for Jianghu. Young bodies. Should we wait for them or go first? Looking at the girls leaving here happily, Prawalton said to Jianghu with envy. Looking at her appearance, Jianghu was a little uncertain about what this woman was going to do. Let's go first. However, not knowing what she was going to do did not prevent Jianghu from doing business with her. After saying politely, Jianghu turned the steering wheel and rushed in the direction of the beach. As for Prawalton and Selena Gomez, who had not spoken much since they arrived here, they also followed Jianghu to the beach. Not long after, the three had already arrived at the beach where Jianghu lived. The moment they stepped on the beach, Selena Gomez, who had not spoken until now, couldn't help but exclaim softly. Her scream and the roar of the beach motorcycle also alarmed Edward Anderson and the other fishermen who were preparing to go out to sea in the fishing port in the distance. Hey, boss, are you going out to sea? Seeing Jianghu coming over on the motorcycle, Edward Anderson couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing his words, Jianghu also looked at Prawalton. In fact, it was mainly up to her to decide what to do. No, let's just play on the shore. The sea is not so friendly. When talking about this matter, Prawalton seemed to have returned to her queen-like state. She glanced at Jianghu with a cold and arrogant face and said lightly. No, let's just play on the beach. Hearing her words, Jianghu didn't say much and just said to Ai Dehua. Then the three of them rode the motorcycle and came to a more remote beach in the distance. Jianghu's manor was originally bought by a rich man for vacation, so whether it was the environment or the location, it was quite good. In front of them was a half-moon-shaped bay. A few white clouds floated in the blue sky. Below the white clouds was the same blue sea. Behind this bay, half of it was a green grassland, and the other half was a forest. It blocked the invasion of the sea breeze. Therefore, when driving on the grassland, one might feel that the wind was a little strong, about level 3 or 4. But on this beach, the wind was weak, about level 1 or 2 breeze. At this time of the year, it was very comfortable to blow on one's body. The beach on the coast was not open to outsiders, so whether it was the water quality or the beach, it was not polluted. There was not even a piece of garbage to be found. On the beach, there was a very good sand. The only thing that would hurt one's feet might be the shells or small crabs in the sand. There were not even any big stones here. One had to admit that this was a very beautiful place. After stopping the motorcycle, the two women also got off the motorcycle. They looked at the blue sea in front of them and stretched. It's really beautiful here, and it's very quiet. Selena Gomez ran her fingers through her hair. She wasn't in a good mood at first, but after seeing the beautiful scenery in front of her, she seemed to have calmed down a lot. Since you are here to have fun, don't think about those things. According to the words of Jianghu's country, there will be a way out when the car reaches the mountain. It's useless for you to worry here. How about I help you? Whether it's your music or that little bastard, I can help you settle it. Prawalton also combed her hair, which was messed up by the sea breeze, and slowly walked to Selena Gomez's back. She slowly wrapped her arms around Selena Gomez's back. Just like that, the two women stood on the beach, hugging each other. Seeing this scene, Jianghu was stunned. What the hell is this? Is this the legendary lace? Boss, I'm here to bring you a deck chair. Just when Jianghu could neither advance nor retreat, and the scene was divided into two, one side was very sweet, the other was very awkward, Edward Anderson came to save Jianghu. Because Jianghu said that he did not want to go out to sea and wanted to have fun here, Edward Anderson thought that Jianghu would not just sit on the beach with the two girls, so he just happened to have a few deck chairs in the dock. These were made in the winter when he and Luo Binsi were bored. These deck chairs were not as beautiful as those in tourist destinations, but they were sturdy. Although the white wooden deck chairs were not as beautiful, they still looked good. Together with a box of beer, a box of drinks, and a sun umbrella, it really did look like something. Hearing his voice, Jianghu immediately went to take these things back, and Selena Gomez also reacted. She immediately broke free from Prawalton's arms and walked toward Jianghu. Prawalton looked at Jianghu with some annoyance, and she gently curled her lips, but still walked over. The two women only helped to carry some light things, such as deck chairs, sun umbrellas, drinks, beer, and the like. Naturally, it was Jianghu and Edouard Anderson who carried them. After everything was done, Jianghu and Ai Dehua went back to the dock. Because don't forget, it was not just the three of them here, Aphrodite and the others would also come later. While Jianghu was busy here, a taxi had already driven into Winthrop's territory. Chapter 259. What's the situation with these girls? Half lying on the wide recliner, Selena Gomez whispered to Jianghu beside her. Jianghu was also lying there, looking at the girls in the distance, including Prawalton, who was enjoying it. He took a sip of beer and slowly explained. These girls actually came from a bitter background. They used to be deaf and mute. Because they were misled by bad people, they went on the wrong path. Fortunately, I found them, and then I hired them to help me grow grapes. Jianghu didn't finish the details. The dark history of these girls, it's enough for them to know. There's no need to spread it everywhere. This is not his style. So that's the case. I was wondering why they didn't talk or laugh. It turns out that there's such a story. I didn't know that you were a good person. Hearing Jianghu's explanation, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. She propped herself up, picked up a bottle of guarana next to her, opened it, and drank it. At the same time, she looked at Jianghu with a funny face. Jianghu also curled his lips and said helplessly. Good person is not a word that should be used to praise a man, at least in Wuxia, this is not a good word. Why? Hearing Jianghu's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but have some doubts. Good man, shouldn't this be a good word? Well, think about it, when you reject your pursuers, what do you usually say? Looking at Selena Gomez, Jianghu guided her to understand the meaning of the word good person. Well, let me think about it. If it was a few years ago, I would say that I am still young and I am not ready to date others. If it was a few years ago, I might say that I have a boyfriend. If it was in the past 2 years, I might say that I want to put more energy into my career. Well, that's it. Hearing Jianghu's words, Selena Gomez really thought about it seriously and said to Jianghu. Hearing her answer, Jianghu was shocked again. That's fine, okay. I thought you would say, sorry, you are a good person, but we are not suitable for each other. Shrugging, Jianghu said helplessly. In fact, this is the real meaning of a good person. Ha 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 ha, that's something only aunties in their 30s or 40s would say. We don't know how to say that. Wow, your guarana is really strong. It makes me want to exercise. Do you want to try it? Hearing Jianghu's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help shaking her head and said. She really didn't expect the answer to be so simple, but after laughing for a while, she found that she was really a little hot, so she couldn't help but sit up and said to Jianghu. However, Jianghu usually goes down the mountain every day. Today, he doesn't want to go into the water again. Because as long as he goes into the water, the big idiot in the water will definitely come looking for him. When that time comes, there will be a shark swimming to the shore. These women probably won't dare to play anymore. So for their sake, Jianghu shook his head and refused her kindness. No need, you can do whatever you want. Okay. Seeing that Jianghu didn't want to go into the water, Selena Gomez didn't care. She stood up from the recliner and took off the slightly thick sweater she was wearing. Since they are going to the beach to play, although they don't know if they can go into the water, these girls are already prepared. At this time, on the row of recliners, there is a pile of clothes on each recliner. These are the clothes that the girls took off. They didn't wear underwear inside, but they wore bikinis directly. Selena Gomez did the same. As she took off her sweater, a bikini top that was almost the same as her underwear appeared in front of Jianghu. On the left and right sides of the bikini top, there were 2 US flags printed on it. Jianghu didn't know what to say. Is this patriotism or not? It's also difficult for him to understand. However, Selena Gomez is a public figure after all. She is used to being stared at like this, so she is not embarrassed. After taking off her top, she took off her tight jeans, and then 2 pieces of cloth and 2 straps appeared in front of Jianghu's eyes. Well, this is the first time Jianghu saw this thing with his own eyes. Are you really not going to swim? Feeling that Jianghu's eyes were fixed, Selena Gomez couldn't help but chuckle. Although this is only the 3rd time she and Jianghu have met, the open atmosphere of the UA made her not mind Jianghu's gaze. Of course, if she wants to go further, it is probably impossible, but it doesn't matter if she let Jianghu's eyes take advantage of her. On the contrary, this will be regarded as a display of her own charm. Oh, no. After all, Jianghu is still inexperienced. He clearly gave up on such a great opportunity to take advantage of her. Hearing that Jianghu decided not to go down, Selena also raised her eyebrows, then walked to the beach with a smile and joined Aphrodite and the others who were still playing by the beach. As for Walton, at this time, she was also fighting with the group of girls. She didn't have the cold and domineering female CEO feeling that Jianghu saw her for the first and second time. I don't know if this guy has schizophrenia. Why does she change so quickly? It's impossible to guard against her. But these clothes are pretty good. Jianghu picked up the beer next to him, took a sip, and said with some satisfaction. At this time, these girls were playing on the beach. Naturally, it was impossible for them to wear ordinary clothes when playing on the beach. Therefore, at this time, these girls were all wearing swimming clothes. In the UA, except for elementary school students, very few people would buy one-piece swimsuits. He had to admit that these women's swimsuits were very good. Aphrodite and the others had never bought these things before, so when they bought, they consulted Mrs. Philemon and the others, and Mrs. Philemon and the others were all housewives. Naturally, they wouldn't play too wild. Therefore, although they bought bikinis, they were all very conservative. They were of the same color, or there were some stripes on it, such as checks and so on. At first glance, it was a very conservative style. Although it was called a bikini, it was very thick. Among these women's swimsuits, the most eye-catching one was Walton's black one. In addition to the 2 pieces of black fabric in front of the top, there were only 2 pieces of black fabric on the bottom, one in front and one behind. The rest of the body was covered by metal rings, revealing a large area of skin. He had to admit that Walton did have the capital. Her upper body was indeed big, surprisingly big. The demeanor of a mature woman really could kill these little girls around her, but she also maintained her skin very well. Her skin was white and tender, and her figure was also very good. She didn't have the feeling of a foreign woman who was beautiful before 30 and had to call her dad after 30. Looking at these people playing around, Jianghu was also very happy. At least he was very satisfied with this scene. As for Selena Gomez, who was still a little unhappy, she also smiled at this time. In this place where no one knew who she was, or even if someone knew who she was, they wouldn't care. She was really happy. The unhappiness caused by her work and her wrong love life had disappeared. Looking at her happy face, Walton was also very happy. It seemed that it was very wise to bring her here this time. Just as everyone was playing happily, a taxi stopped at the gate of Jianghu's manor. The doorbell rang. Because only Delina and Marion were in Jianghu's house, the 2 girls didn't dare to open the door easily, so they transferred the call to Mrs. Philemon's house. Hello. As the call was transferred, Mrs. Philemon's face also appeared in front of the screen at the door. In her sight, 2 Asian faces also appeared in front of her. Hello, is this Jianghu's house? Looking at the middle-aged woman in front of them, the 2 women were stunned for a moment, but the woman with a strong aura quickly reacted and asked in very pure English. Jianghu? The boss? He's not in the villa right now. Why are you looking for him? Hearing the two women's words, Mrs. Philemon realized that they had come to see the proprietor. That was right. He's not in the villa. Then may I ask, where is he? I called him, but he didn't pick up, so I came here directly. I'm a good friend of his in China. Hearing Mrs. Philemon's words, the woman frowned and asked doubtfully. Oh, he's now accompanying a guest on the beach by the sea. The signal there is indeed a little weak. How about this? Please wait a moment, I'll ask them to send you there. Hearing that the two women were Jianghai's friends in China, Mrs. Philemon didn't doubt them. After all, this was their own manor. If anyone dared to harm Jianghai, they would be courting death. What's more, in Mrs. Philemon's opinion, the two women didn't seem to be bad people. At least, they didn't seem to be a threat. With their small arms and legs, they might not be able to beat her. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone, then spoke to Mrs. Philemon through the walkie-talkie. At this time, Mrs. Philemon and the others were herding cattle on the grassland, so the only place that was free was the winery. After hearing this, although he was a little dissatisfied that his work was interrupted, the only one who was free, Connor Murphy, still drove a large four-wheeled motorcycle to the door. From afar, he saw the two women carrying two boxes standing at the gate of the manor. Chapter 260. President Xi, are all the people in the United States so rude? They didn't even invite us in to have a seat. Seeing Mrs. Philemon directly hang up the TV, a woman who looked younger than her, who had been standing behind the woman, said with an unhappy expression. Hearing the girl's words, the woman standing in front chuckled. You don't understand. The people in the United States take their private property very seriously. If there is no search warrant, these people won't let you in, even the police won't be able to enter. If the police dare to enter, they can even shoot in self-defense. Compared to the assistant behind her, the woman in front obviously knew more than her. After all, she had been here for many years. Barbaric country. Hearing the woman in front say that the people here even dared to hit the police, she couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. At least such a thing has never been heard of in China. Are the domestic police so easy to mess with? Seeing that the girl behind her finally shut her mouth, the woman standing in front couldn't help but laugh. In fact, what she said was mostly an exaggeration. If the United States was really so lawless, then there wouldn't be so many people who wanted to come here every year. It wasn't so easy to do well here. After waiting here for about 5 minutes, a large four-wheeled motorcycle that could seat 4 people drove to the door. As the door was opened, Connor Murphy's 5 views, which were obviously unique to the Germanic people, appeared in front of the two women. Hello, are you the boss you're looking for? Get in the car. Glancing at the two, Connor Murphy said calmly. Wow, Caucasian uncle, you look so handsome. Hearing her words, the assistant's eyes couldn't help but light up. A young girl like her likes these mature uncles the most. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Sorry to trouble you. Fortunately, the assistant spoke in Chinese, so the white man couldn't understand. After the woman standing in front kicked her, she said in fluent English. Then the two put the luggage on the four-wheeled motorcycle. Then, the man started the car and drove them to the beach in the distance. Along the way, the two women sitting in the car had been looking at the scenery here. They had to admit that the scenery in Jianghai's manor was really beautiful. If they used some high-resolution cameras to take pictures, they could even use it as a desktop without any repair. The blue sky, the white clouds, the blue sea, the neatly arranged villas, the small villas, and the flocks of cattle and sheep that could be seen in the distance, and the forest at the edge. Such a scene was not an exaggeration to say that it was a painting. This Jianghai really knows how to enjoy life. No wonder he's unwilling to return to China. Looking at the scene before her, the assistant couldn't help but mutter softly. Upon hearing her words, the woman beside her nodded in agreement. In fact, she understood Jianghai a little. Such a good place was indeed much more comfortable than staying in the country. However, as the four-wheeled motorcycle continued to move forward, the expressions of the two who originally wanted to enjoy the scenery gradually changed. The assistant gently nudged the woman beside her with the tip of her elbow and asked in a low voice, "President Qi, is this place Jianghai's?" "Maybe." However, the woman wasn't very sure. She had heard that Jianghai's territory wasn't small, but she didn't expect it to be this big. It was beyond her expectations. She didn't expect Jianghai's territory to be this big. Just when they were wondering how big Jianghai's manor was, they finally reached the end. The originally endless grassland had reached its limit at this time. Looking around, the grassland was replaced by the blue ocean in the distance and the golden beach beside it. In the middle of the beach and the ocean, there was a large dock. At this time, not only were there several houses built on the dock, but there were also many boats, big boats, small boats, fishing boats, and all kinds of boats. When they were dozens of meters away from the dock, Connor Murphy, who was driving in front, couldn't help but slow down, and then shouted in the direction of the huts on the dock, "Hey, Ai Dehua, is the boss still there?" Probably hearing his voice, a very strong man came out of the room. When he saw the three people here, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. "Hey, Connor, the boss is still there." "Who are you?" "I'm the boss's friend in Wuxia. I'll send them there first." After responding to Ai Dehua, Connor Murphy stepped on the accelerator, and the motorcycle also rushed to the other side of the beach. After about 5 minutes, some figures in the distance and the reclining chairs on the shore entered the eyes of these three people. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle, Jianghai couldn't help but look over here, but when he saw the people riding the motorcycle, he was stunned. He was not surprised by Connor Murphy's arrival, but he was surprised by the two people behind him. And just when Jianghai was surprised, the two people here had already taken a car and came to a place not far from Jianghai. When they saw the scene on the beach, the faces of these two people were also a little strange. The assistant's face was ugly, and the woman's face, which was originally livid, seemed to have become even more livid. Seeing Jianghai stand up to greet them, Connor also slowly slowed down in front of Jianghai. "Boss, they said they were your friends in Wuxia, so I brought them here first." Looking at Jianghai's strange gaze, Connor Murphy, a strict German, also felt that something seemed to be wrong. Did he bring the wrong people? But since he had already brought them here, he could only bite the bullet and say to Jianghai. But after listening to his words, Jianghai's look became even stranger. "Friends? I thought we would be enemies when we meet again. I don't like to make enemies easily. It seems that you didn't take what I said to you to heart. You even had so much fun." Casually getting off the dune motorcycle, the woman and her attendant walked in front of Jianghai. This woman, at this time, probably someone had already guessed her origin. After all, there were only 2 women named President Qi in Jianghai's memory. One was already dead. If she came to him now, he would probably be scared to death. The other one was the most familiar stranger on the surface, Qi Li, President Qi. Yes, the person who appeared in front of Jianghai at this time was not someone else, but the most controversial Qi Li, and her little assistant. "What can I do for you?" Seeing that Qi Li's eyes skipped over him and focused on the women who were playing in the distance, Jianghai frowned with some doubts. He really didn't think that he and Qi Li could be considered friends. After all, on the day of the new year, the two broke up completely. Jianghai had already expressed his attitude. He was definitely going to divorce this marriage. Even if he had to give up half of his manor, he must divorce her. "I came to talk to you, why? Am I not welcome, or do you really want to give me half of the manor?" "I just looked around when I came. Your place is not small." Smiling at Jianghai, Qi Li first turned her head and looked at Connor Murphy. She thanked him in English, then ignored her luggage and walked directly past Jianghai to the seat in the distance. As for the little attendant behind her, he also hurried to follow. At this time, the German also felt that the atmosphere seemed to be a bit wrong. Although he was a strict German, he still liked the job and the manner, so he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. The most important thing was that Jianghai and Qi Li both spoke in Mandarin. He couldn't understand, so he could only stand aside. It's okay, I do recognize them. They are my friends. As for their luggage, put it in my villa first. We'll talk about it when I go back. Looking at Connor's confused look, Jiang Hai smiled. This German also knew that he was going to ruin things. But there was no way to blame him for this. After all, they didn't know Qi Li and didn't know the story between him and Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Connor Murphy did not feel like he was granted amnesty, it was almost the same. He immediately turned the corner and rushed in the direction of Jiang Hai's villa with the two people's luggage. At this time, the two went straight to the row of reclining chairs, picked two and sat down, but the position they sat in happened to be the position of Pra Walton and Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez didn't care. Although she became famous at a young age, it was not to the extent that others couldn't sit on the chair she sat on. However, Pra Walton was a little surprised. Although she showed her silly and sweet side now, people who really knew her were very familiar with her. She could be the least favored daughter in the Walton family, and she snatched the position of the president of Sam's Club and Walmart without relying on men. How could she be silly, naive, and sweet? She had already sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere when the two of them arrived. There might be telepathy between strong women. When she saw Qi Li for the first time, she knew that this girl was definitely not a good person like herself. Qi Li was like a fierce tiger that broke into her territory. How could Pra Walton retreat? Everyone knew that a female tiger was fiercer than a tiger. At this time, seeing the two people sitting in her seat, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but raise slightly. She left the crowd and walked over. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked over and stood in front of the two people. Tell me, why did you come back to me? Every time he saw Qi Li, Jiang Hai found it difficult to maintain his calm. Can't I come to you if there's nothing? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyebrows raised, and her slender eyebrows also raised. Don't say these useless things. As soon as he heard Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was a little impatient. Hey, Jiang, do you have guests again? But before he finished speaking, Pra Walton's voice behind him interrupted him. Chapter 261. Pra Walton's words were very interesting. For Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they had different meanings. For Jiang Hai, there were indeed guests again. Because the first guests were Pra Walton and Selena Gomez. They didn't know Qi Li, so naturally, there were guests again. But in Qi Li's ears, these words were a bit of a demonstration. Clearly, they didn't treat Jiang Hai as an outsider. That was why they said there were guests again. They treated Jiang Hai as their own territory. Jiang Hai, we can talk about our business when we have time. Who is this? Why don't you introduce her to me? Looking at the woman in front of her, Qi Li also sat up straight. She was originally sitting on the recliner without anything to lean on, but her back was straight. Her arrogant appearance was like a peacock. She squinted her eyes and exuded an imposing manner to Pra Walton in front of her. This is Pra Walton. He came to buy my cattle. This is Qi Li. She is Hua Xia's friend. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also felt that he shouldn't wash his dirty linen in public. Jiang Hai didn't want to let everyone know the story between him and Qi Li, so it was better to stop fighting temporarily at this time. Looking at Qi Li and Pra Walton, Jiang Hai introduced them in English. Walton? Walmart's family? Compared to Jiang Hai, who didn't find out anything after he came back, Qi Li was more capable than him. As soon as she heard this surname, she had already reacted immediately and asked with some surprise. Oh. You know me. Hello. Hearing that Qi Li knew her surname, Pra Walton chuckled. She didn't mind Jiang Hai saying that she was here to buy cattle. Indeed, she was here to buy cattle. However, her eyes kept glancing at Jiang Hai and Lu Li. Her sixth sense told her that there must be a story between these two guys. Even Jiang Hai was a little afraid of this woman, which made her more interested in the story. Although she had only met Jiang Hai 3 times, she had some understanding of him. This guy was a reckless and overconfident maniac. When he didn't understand the rules of the New York beef show, he dared to spend more than $1 million to participate. Fortunately, he won in the end and made a name for himself. However, only they knew how lucky they were. If it wasn't for Selena Gomez, if it wasn't for her, then Jianghu wouldn't even be able to pass the first round. Although his beef was indeed good, his confidence was a little too much. At the same time, this guy was also a reckless person. It was rare to see someone wearing outdoor clothing to participate in the NBA All-Star reception. It was this kind of person who had two personalities. The first impression he gave people was that he was stubborn, and the second impression was that he was stubborn. As long as he set his mind on something, then he would definitely do it. This was also called bigotry. It was hard to imagine that such a person would have anything to be afraid of. However, it was clear that this woman named Shili gave Jianghu a very dangerous signal. This made him constantly on guard against her, which made her very interested in Shili. Hello, you are the famous Walton family and the Walmart Group. How could I not know? However, I am a little surprised. If you are just here to buy beef, then you don't have to come here personally to buy it. Although Chili felt a little pressured by the other party's identity, she wasn't someone to be trifled with. She straightened her clothes and spoke to Walton with a serious face. If it was ordinary beef, then I naturally wouldn't have to come here personally. However, your friend's beef is not ordinary beef. If I didn't come here personally to inspect it, I think our group wouldn't be at ease. After hearing Chi Li's words, Walton also spoke lightly. Although the two of them spoke very softly at this time. There was also a smile on his face, but Jianghu, who had been standing between the two of them, felt that the weather had begun to heat up for no reason. What's going on? If this was the world of anime at this time, the sky would probably be cut open by this momentum. Of course, this was just Jianghu's imagination. Then the two of them spoke one after another. Although they were smiling like flowers, there was a sense of tit-for-tat between their words. Jianghu wanted to interrupt several times, but just as he opened his mouth, the two of them had already started talking fiercely. In terms of momentum, she really crushed Jianghu dozens of times, but what also surprised Jianghu was that Chili didn't fall behind. After all, Walton's strength was there. In the Walmart family, she was able to manage Sam's Club alone. From this, it can be seen that this woman was definitely not simple. However, Chili only took over the family company for a year. In a year's time, she was able to be on par with Walton, which really surprised Jianghu. Hey, Jianghu, your sea is so beautiful, there are so many animals, have you ever thought of developing it as a tourist area? At this time, suddenly, Selena Gomez in the distance ran over with a sea urchin in her hand. Just now, she took advantage of the fact that everyone was playing and snorkeling in the sea. The sun penetrated the sea and shone on the shallows. When people dive underwater, the colorful coral reefs and dreamy marine life will surprise them. But unfortunately, although Selena Gomez can swim, her swimming skills are not good, at least she can't catch fish with her hands, so in the end, she only picked up a sea urchin and floated up. But don't get me wrong, people in Europe and the United States don't eat this sea urchin. This sea urchin is actually used to feed lobsters and crabs in the sea. Of course, some more precious fish, such as parrotfish, will also eat this thing. However, on Jianghu's coast, this thing is really too much, even Jianghu doesn't like to eat it. You don't like to eat this thing, do you? Looking at Selena Gomez, who came over with a sea urchin, Jianghu asked with some doubts. Of course, no, I like to eat meat. Hearing Jianghu's words, Selena Gomez smiled and waved her hand to deny it. By the way, it's almost dark. What do you want to eat? I'll get it for you. But her words made Jianghu slap his forehead. Originally, he was a little overwhelmed here. Now that Chili is here, he probably won't have the time and opportunity to watch the girls play. Instead, it's better to leave here and find something to eat. I came here to check your beef, of course I want to eat beef. Hearing Jianghu's words, Walton said with a smile. No problem, what about you? Seeing that Prawalton has already ordered, Jianghu also looked at the others. I've been on a diet recently. Although the beef is good, the calories are still a bit high. It would be better if there is fish. Looking at Jianghu, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. As a public figure, she naturally needs to control her body shape. Meat is not something that can be eaten casually. I don't care. When it comes to Chi Li is also a bachelor. To be honest, she doesn't know what Jianghu has here, so she said very indifferently. Hearing what she said, Jianghu can't help but curl his lips. Indifference is actually the most difficult thing to accept. Okay, then you can rest here first. In a while, you can take my four-wheeled motorcycle back. Aphrodite and the others know the way. I'll get you something to eat. At the moment, Jianghu didn't say much and directly turned around and ran toward the distant dock. After Jianghu turned around and left, the two women who had been talking happily when Jianghu was still here, suddenly stopped talking. At this moment, Prawalton pointed at her clothes on the recliner. Chi Li naturally knew what she meant, but she didn't move away and just sat on the side. Seeing Chi Li's movement, Prawalton also chuckled, picked up her clothes and towel, and directly lay on Jianghu's recliner. Then, the two of them, one lying down and one sitting, motionlessly looked at the blue sky, white clouds, blue sea, and golden beach. This atmosphere made Selena Gomez a little uncomfortable. She quickly returned to Aphrodite's side and played with the girls. As for Chi Li's assistant, she wasn't so lucky. She could only stand beside Chi Li. Although it was very comfortable here, the pressure in front of the two tigresses, oh no, the strong women, made her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, Jianghu didn't have the leisure to care about this little assistant. In fact, even if he could, he was too lazy to care. After all, the person who despised him the most was this woman. Jianghu felt very comfortable letting her suffer. When they arrived at the dock, Jianghu steered a boat and left the dock. After arriving at the junction of the coral reef and the fish farm, Jianghu took off his clothes and dived into the sea. As Jianghu dived into the water, a black figure quickly swam over. Ever since Jianghu leveled up, he wasn't as cautious about using the spiritual energy in the scales as he was in the beginning. These days, in addition to using the spiritual energy in the scales for his pets, Little Yellow, Xiaobai, Chirp, Bucktooth, and Little Xia, he also gave Big Fool, his bodyguard, 2 extra pieces of spiritual energy. Once these 2 pieces of spiritual energy were injected, Big Fool's IQ and size were now rising in a straight line. The sand tiger shark, which was originally only 4 or 5 meters long, had grown to more than 8 meters long at this time, which was longer than the average great white shark. However, because of the transformation of spiritual energy, its teeth were sharper, faster, and stronger. Even if it really encountered a great white shark, it could still teach the great white shark a lesson. At this time, in the sea, the only thing that could compete with it might be the killer whale. It wasn't because the killer whale was strong, but because it was a group of creatures. Jianghu patted its head. He didn't have time to play with it today. He paddled and dived into the deep sea. Chapter 262. Bang! With a splash of water, Jianghu also dived into the water. Big Idiot sensed his presence and immediately swam over to him from his territory. The way it shook its head and wagged its tail did look a little scary, but Jianghu knew very well that this guy was actually acting cute. It was hard to understand how a shark would act cute, but it did look scary. Pointing at the bottom of the sea, Jianghu grabbed Big Idiot's dorsal fin with both hands. As Big Idiot swung its tail, it instantly dived into the depths of the sea at a speed much faster than Jianghu's swimming speed. When it was about to reach the bottom, Jianghu let go of his hand and landed on the seabed. The fine sand on the seabed sank a lot when Jianghu stepped on it. Some flatfish that were originally hiding in the sand nearby immediately swam away after sensing Jianghu's presence. As for Jianghu, he stabilized his body and walked towards the coral reef. There are some dangers in the coral reefs. For example, there are some silly eels, silly sea snakes, sea anemones, poisonous fish, jellyfish, and the like. All of them are very dangerous. However, Jianghu already had some understanding of these dangers. At least, he cherishes his life, so he wouldn't play around with his own life. The marine resources in Jianghu's territory were indeed quite rich. Whether it was fish, shellfish, lobsters, or crabs, if he wanted to eat them himself, he wouldn't be able to finish them in his lifetime. But if he caught them and sold them, it would definitely not be enough. Fortunately, Jianghu didn't intend to touch the coral reef. This area was also considered his conservation area. If there were any precious fish species in the future, he could breed them here. As for the outer sea, it was for breeding the economic fish. After calculating in his heart, Jianghu counted the people who would be eating dinner tonight. Although Aphrodite and the others were playing here, they would probably have to go back when it was time for dinner. That meant that the people eating at his house would be himself, Delina, Marion, Prawalton, Selena Gomez, Chi Li, and her little assistant. Well, actually, the assistant couldn't be blamed for looking down on Jianghu. Jianghu also looked down on her. Even now, Jianghu still didn't know her name. There are a total of 7 people. In addition to steak, I'll get some fish, abalones, sea cucumbers, and lobsters. Forget about crabs. After calculating in his heart, Jianghu took out the knife at his waist and headed for the coral reef. In fact, abalones were very easy to breed, especially when the seawater was very clear. Breeding abalones basically required a lot of seaweed, rich bait, clear water early, stable seawater density, rocks on the bottom, no industrial pollution in the sea area, and fewer hostile creatures. It wouldn't be frozen in winter, so it was best to breed abalones in a frozen place. The temperature requirements for this thing weren't too high. For example, the Bohai Bend and the Huanghai Bay near Lu Province could also be bred. To be honest, the temperature in Boston was much warmer than the Bohai Bay in China. The highest temperature in summer didn't exceed 30 degrees, and the coldest time in winter didn't exceed -10 degrees. It was basically about the same as in Lu Province. It was a good place to breed abalones. However, it was still the same saying. In fact, people in Europe and America weren't very interested in abalones. Take the most famous Australian abalones for example. In fact, the locals didn't eat them very much. In some public beaches, you could go into the water and catch them to eat. Of course, if you wanted to take them away, you had to limit the number of abalones. Basically, each person could only take a few abalones. It was okay to take them back for fun, but it wasn't good to eat them. In some protected parks and lakes in Australia, these large abalones could grow to 3 or even 2 heads. However, they weren't allowed to be harvested, but the locals didn't eat them either. Raising lobsters in the United States could make money, but raising abalones? You'll lose a lot of money. Prawalton naturally didn't come here to eat abalones. However, in China, abalones were still quite popular. The average size sold for about 20 renminbi each, and the seaside sold for about 10 renminbi. The large ones that Jianghu picked could be sold for a few hundred RMB per kilogram at the seaside in China. It was naturally more expensive if he went to a restaurant. The reason why he picked these abalones wasn't because he didn't want to show off. He just wanted to tell Chi Li, don't think that he, Jianghu, is not doing well abroad. He is doing much better here than you. The blue sky, white clouds, no pressure, lobsters, steaks, and large abalones couldn't be enjoyed in China. With this kind of mood, Jianghu soon scooped up about 20 abalones from the reef in front of him. Although abalones were the most abundant in the Pacific Ocean, followed by the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't a problem to get hundreds or thousands of abalones in such a big sea. What? Arctic Ocean? Sorry, there wasn't any abalones there. Jianghu quickly picked up more than 20 abalones, then swam to the depths and grabbed some lobsters. Lobsters and abalones were the same. Their size determined their fate. The large ones were naturally very expensive, and the small ones weren't worth much. Lobsters that weighed about 2 to 3 kilograms were only around 10 renminbi per kilogram here. Sometimes, one could even buy a kilogram for less than 10 renminbi. Jianghu wanted to show off and treat people, so he naturally couldn't get ordinary lobsters. Therefore, he specially picked 2 large ones. Boston lobsters might not be as big as Australian lobsters, but the meat of Boston lobsters was much thicker than that of Australian lobsters. The meat in the 2 big pincers was extraordinarily thick, and the taste was naturally excellent. Jianghu picked 2 lobsters that weighed about 10 kilograms and held them in his hands. They weighed about 12 to 1. 5 kilograms and were more than 1 meter long. In the sea, they were definitely big monsters. Compared to abalones, lobsters were much more abundant in this sea area. Most of them were wild, and some of them were shrimp seedlings that Jianghu threw away. Because Jianghu injected spirit energy into them before throwing them away, almost none of them died of illness. Of course, those that were eaten were counted separately, but this was also considered the survival of the fittest in nature. After catching the abalones and lobsters, Jianghu picked up some sea cucumbers from the bottom of the sea. There were really a lot of sea cucumbers at the bottom of the sea. Jianghu casually picked a dozen big ones, then gestured to Big Idiot, who was hovering above his head in the distance. Big Idiot quickly swam towards the depths of the coral reef. After a few seconds, the originally quiet coral reef suddenly became lively. Big Idiot was chasing a big fish at this time and was rushing towards Jianghu. However, it was obvious that the fish in front of Big Idiot wasn't swimming fast. The reason why Big Idiot didn't catch it was to let Jianghu catch it. It couldn't be helped. Although Jianghu wasn't afraid of water at this time, it didn't mean that he could catch the fish in the water. At least, it was still difficult for him to catch most of the fish with his bare hands. But Big Idiot didn't care, he could catch it. When the fish swam not far from Jianghu had already stretched out his hand. Although he couldn't chase Jianghu in a straight line, he could catch it with his hands. Jianghu's right thumb, index finger, and middle finger instantly grabbed the fish's gills and mouth. The fish was already in his hands. After getting it, Jianghu observed the fish. This was a spotted grouper, which was originally distributed in tropical waters, both in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The largest body length was 1 meter. It mainly lived along the rocky reef areas where the water quality was relatively turbid, but it was often found in the soda water area. It was fierce and belonged to the ambush-type fish. It was very popular in China. Originally, it was rare in the Atlantic region of the United States. To be precise, in the Atlantic Ocean, even groupers were rare. But in recent years, there had been a lot of breeding. Although it wasn't to the extent that you could see fish in the cold zone of the tropics, fish in the cold zone of the tropics were still quite common. The spotted grouper caught by Jianghu was about 80 centimeters long. It was indeed not a small fish. Jianghu glanced at his watch. It wasn't his Patek Philippe anymore. That watch was good, but it wouldn't work in the water. It could only withstand up to 30 meters of water. Therefore, Jianghu deliberately bought a diving watch. This one was much cheaper. Rolex, well, it was actually cheap, but it was only compared to Jianghu's original watch. Rolex DPSEA, Deep Sea, with a maximum diving depth of 3,900 meters, a purebred diving watch. Because it was custom-made, the price was $128,000, which was less than 1 million RMB, but it was very expensive in China. Compared with the gorgeous shape of Patek Philippe, Jianghu actually preferred this kind of sports type. Moreover, for the current him, the bottom of the sea above 3,900 meters was not something he could easily set foot in. Not to mention 3,900 meters, he had to consider diving above 500 meters because Big Idiot couldn't go down that deep. Its usual depth was about 200 meters, and 400 meters was its limit. After all, great white sharks could only dive to 1,000 meters at most, and they didn't dare to stay any longer. Jianghu could ignore the pressure of the water, but it didn't mean that other creatures could do the same. If he encountered a sperm whale, king squid, or something in the depths of the sea, Jianghu might die there. He cherished his life so much. Hee. After catching the fish, Jianghu looked at the time. Unknowingly, it was already 3:00 in the afternoon. These girls may have ignored the time when they were playing on the shore. It didn't matter if they didn't eat lunch, but dinner had to be prepared. Therefore, Jianghu returned to the surface from the deep sea immediately. After throwing the things into the small boat, he washed his body with water, then started the engine and sped toward the dock. Not long after, Jianghu returned to the dock and drove a four-wheeled motorcycle away. Jianghu didn't say goodbye to the others and went home first. With the help of Daliana, Marian, and Mrs. Philemon, who came to help, he began to prepare dinner for today. Chapter 263. We're back. After pushing open the door of Jianghu's mansion, Selena Gomez's voice entered the room. Hearing her voice, Jianghu walked out of the kitchen while cracking eggs. What he saw was still the same four people. Just as Jianghu thought, Aphrodite and the others had already left. In fact, although Aphrodite and the others had a lot of fun with these women today, these women were actually very vigilant. This could be seen from the fact that they didn't make any sound in front of these people. So if these people invited them back for dinner, they definitely wouldn't come back. It was precisely because of this that only 4 people came back tonight: Walton, Selena Gomez, Chi Li, and Chi Li's assistant. Well, Jianghu still couldn't remember her name. Go take a shower in the room and come down, dinner is almost ready. Looking at the few people in front of him, they were obviously not in good condition. Walton and Selena Gomez's bodies were still stained with fine sand, and their faces and bodies were also stained with salt left by the sea after being dried by the sun. As for Chi Li and her assistant, although they were much neater, it was still on the beach. However, on the beach, it was still a sunny day. Although they had umbrellas, they were wearing women's suits. They were still sweating profusely. Obviously, they were not in a good state. Jianghu's words, this time, these women did not refuse. Selena and Walton immediately went upstairs, but Chi Li and her assistant hesitated for a moment. Oh, I haven't asked yet, are you going to live here too? Looking at the two, Jianghu patted his forehead. It seems that he hasn't arranged a place for them to live yet. Hearing Jianghu's words, Chi Li raised her head and said with a serious face, of course, can't we? Seeing that she was obviously not in good condition, but still pretending to be arrogant, Jianghu couldn't help but smile. This woman is really... Sometimes I miss her. Okay, I'll take you upstairs. After handing the egg liquid to Daliana, Jianghu took the two upstairs. Maybe because Jianghu felt that the two people's relationship with Walton wasn't very good, he also arranged their room, across from Walton's. For Jianghu, watching a good show was the happiest thing in the world. This is your room, go take a shower, change your clothes, and come down for dinner, I guess you're hungry. Carrying the two people's luggage, Jianghu came to the front of the guest room, put the luggage at the door, and turned to leave. Jianghu, I think we should talk, have a good talk, I don't know when you have time. But as soon as Jianghu left, Chi Li had already stretched out her hand, grabbed Jianghu's wrist, and looked at Jianghu with a serious face. Oh, since you are here, I think we will have time to talk. Hearing Chi Li's words, Jianghu didn't look back, but just said a sentence calmly. Hearing Jianghu's words, Chi Li's eyes were a little hesitant, but she still let go of Jianghu's hand. The moment she let go, Jianghu continued to walk forward, and soon disappeared at the corner of the stairs. Seeing Jianghu's appearance, Chi Li's assistant also puffed up her face and said unhappily, President Chi, look at his attitude. He left us on the beach for half a day, and now he doesn't even give us time to meet? To be honest, after she came here, she did change her view of Jianghu. This Jianghu seemed to be a bit interesting. Although she didn't know where he got the money to build this villa, at least as Chi Li's assistant, she knew very well that Jianghu didn't use the name of Chi Li or the Chi family to get this villa, and now it seemed that he had some cooperation with the world's largest retailer, Walmart, which was really unexpected. In the past, she felt that Jianghu was a mud that couldn't be supported, but when this mud began to shine, she was a little confused. But this didn't mean that she could tolerate Jiang Hai's arrogance. They had already delivered themselves to his door, but he still took it. This guy. Hearing her words, Qili narrowed her eyes, but there was no expression of anger on her face. Instead, she directly picked up her luggage and went to the room. Seeing that Qili didn't speak, the assistant could only helplessly open her mouth, and finally helplessly enter the next room. As for Jiang Hai at this time, he didn't know if he was careless or what, but after he went downstairs and entered the kitchen, he had already forgotten about this matter. Facts proved that Jiang Hai was indeed not the kind of person who liked to think about unrequited love, nor was he the kind of person who liked to think too much. About 10 minutes later, the four women went downstairs, and Jiang Hai had already prepared dinner. Jiang Hai's dinner had a total of 8 dishes. This was also the habit of Wuxia people. 6, 8, 10, these were all very auspicious numbers. 6 was 6, 6 was good luck, 8 was good luck, 10 was 10, 10 was 10, 10 was beautiful. Of course, December's lunar red was also good, 16 was good, 18 was good, but Jiang Hai couldn't make it. So, he only had a total of 8 dishes. The most eye-catching dishes were 2 plates of lobsters and a plate of steamed lobsters. This meter-long lobster lying on the plate was really quite scary. There was also a plate of lobsters, baked with cheese, which was made by Mrs. Philemon. In fact, it was also a dish she had just learned after coming here. After all, with the income of a cowboy, even if they bought lobsters, they would only buy small lobsters. Those lobsters could be eaten as snacks, and it was too troublesome to make them with cheese. This was all learned after coming to Jiang Hai. Around the 2 plates of lobsters, there were 6 dishes: steamed abalone, scallion braised sea cucumber, which was made by Jiang Hai, and fried grouper strips, which was made by taking off the flesh of the grouper and placing it on an iron plate to fry. Generally, this was the way to fry cod strips. Jiang Hai didn't have many opportunities to fry grouper, and this kind of fish tasted best when steamed. But considering that Pra Walton and Selena Gomez weren't used to steamed dishes, it wasn't bad to make it this way. In addition to these 3 dishes, there were 3 other dishes. Of course, the main dish, the steak, was divided into 2 portions by Jiang Hai. One portion was a fried steak that could be eaten directly with a fork, and the other portion was a steak like in a Western restaurant, 1 portion per person. These were all specially selected beef, but the ones that were eaten whole with a fork were the worst among the specially selected beef. The good ones were all made like that. In addition to the 2 steaks, there was also a large bowl of vegetable and fruit salad. This was today's dish, and there was also a large bowl of cheddar soup on the side, which was a must-have. Other than that, the main dish was white bread. After these things were arranged, Mrs. Philemon left first, and Jiang Hai's group of 7 stayed to eat. The 7 of them also sat down under Jiang Hai's signal, but there were some rules when they sat down. Jiang Hai naturally sat at the main seat, and the 2 seats beside him were for Delina and Marion. After all, these 2 were also the masters of this place. But next to Delina were Pra Walton and Selena Gomez, and next to Marion were Qili and her assistant. But after her assistant came downstairs, her original dissatisfaction disappeared. At this time, her eyes were only on the 2 lobsters, the large plate of 2-headed abalone, the large plate of sea cucumber, and countless steaks. She suddenly felt that Jiang Hai was quite good. At least she didn't have to worry about not being able to eat good food with him. Since you're all here, sit down and eat. Seeing everyone sit down, Jiang Hai sat at the main seat and smiled at everyone. He was not a Westerner, nor was he a Wuxia scholar. He didn't have anything to be particular about. Whether it was others who invited him to eat or he invited others to eat, the most important thing was to feel comfortable and comfortable. Extravagance and etiquette didn't work for him. He didn't want to be controlled by others when he was eating. Jiang Hai, aren't you going to introduce them first? Seeing Jiang Hai picking up the fork to eat the steak, Qili couldn't help but cough lightly, then raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai. What's there to introduce? Didn't I introduce them just now? Pra Walton, Selena Gomez. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts, but Qi Li rolled her eyes at him, and at the same time, signaled to his side with her eyes. At this time, Jiang Hai remembered that Qi Li wanted him to introduce Delina and Marian. This is Delina Iveline, my adopted daughter. This is her twin sister, Marian Iveline. This is Pra Walton, you've met in the morning. She's the god of wealth who came to give your dad money this time. This is Selena Gomez, haven't you heard her songs before? As for these two, this is Qi Li, your dad's. Since Qi Li wanted to introduce them, Jiang Hai didn't say much, and directly introduced them at the dining table. It was fine when he first introduced Pra Walton, but when he introduced Qi Li, Jiang Hai hesitated a little, because he didn't know what to introduce. It seemed like he only said that she was his friend on the beach just now, so he should call her his friend now. But before Jiang Hai finished his words, Qi Li interrupted Jiang Hai, I'm your mother, his wife. My name is Qi Li. Maybe you've heard him talk about me, maybe you haven't, but it doesn't matter. This is a gift I brought from China, I hope you like it. Listening to Qi Li's standard English pronunciation, Jiang Hai was stunned, Walton and Selena Gomez were stunned, even Delina and Marian were stunned, including Qi Li's assistant. At this time, countless eyes were looking at her. Chapter 264. However, under the gaze of these people, Qi Li seemed to treat them as air. She just took out 2 wrapped gifts from her bag and deliberately stood up. Then, she placed one gift in front of the 2 girls. President Qi. Looking at the 2 boxes, Qi Li's assistant was a little stunned. Others might not know what those 2 gifts were, but she knew very well that those 2 gifts were not cheap. Moreover, they were custom-made. It could be said that in this world, there were only these 2 things, and there was no third. Originally, the assistant thought that Qi Li prepared them for her mother. Now, it seemed that they were prepared for the 2 girls. However, at this time, not only the assistant was more confused, but Jiang Hai was also more confused. He really wanted to ask this woman what she meant. Was she trying to trick him? However, it was really difficult for him to ask this question. After all, there were outsiders here. Therefore, he just looked at Delina and Marian. At this time, the 2 girls were also a little confused. They didn't understand what was going on. Why did a mother suddenly appear? They knew about the things between Jiang Hai and Qi Li in China, but they didn't know the details. Now, it seemed that a mother from China came to find them. Accept it. Although he was a little confused, a little puzzled, and a little unhappy, Jiang Hai still nodded. After all, there were outsiders and children here. Jiang Hai couldn't say too much. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina and Marian also opened the gift boxes in front of them. This was also the difference between foreigners and Chinese people. After Chinese people received the gift, they didn't open it immediately. Instead, they would wait until they went home to open it. In this way, it was hard to say whether the other party had more money or not. After all, people cared about their face. However, people in the United States were more accustomed to opening the gift and then expressing their love. This also gave the giver a chance to show his face in front of others. Of course, if the gift wasn't good, then showing his face would become a disgrace. However, obviously, Qi Li, who had been in the United States for so long, knew this. In addition, she was very confident in her gift. When the gift boxes were opened, 2 diamond bracelets appeared in front of the 2 girls. Wow, it's so beautiful. These 2 bracelets were obviously designed by a famous designer. It was very likely that it was a limited edition. The base should be platinum, and in the middle of the platinum, there should be 10 diamonds. The main diamond is about 1 carat, and the other 9 diamonds are more than 50 cents. This bracelet's diamond alone is worth about $10,000. In addition to the design fee and the platinum, this bracelet is worth about $20,000. This is the most expensive gift. This is a little too expensive. Jiang Hai glanced at the 2 bracelets. Although he didn't know how much they cost, he knew that they definitely wouldn't be cheap since they were so shiny. Therefore, he said to Chi Li hesitantly. Is this for you? It's for the children. Since you agreed to accept it, it has nothing to do with you. Don't look at it first. You can look at it when you go back to your room. However, Chi Li retorted after hearing Jiang Hai's words. When she saw that Jiang Hai was a little speechless, Chi Li changed her style and instantly became a good wife and mother. She looked at the two girls in front of her and said gently. The two girls looked at her, looked at each other, and nodded at her. Then, they gestured a thank you with their hands and put the gift box away. However, they put it behind their chairs like they treasured it very much. Jiang Hai had always been raising these two girls according to the principle of adopted daughters. Although he didn't spoil them, it could be said that he spoiled them very much. Except for sleeping with him, he gave them whatever they wanted. Clothes, toys, TVs, game consoles, computers, mobile phones, iPads, and so on. These two girls had everything that other people's children had. Moreover, they were all of the best quality. However, Jiang Hai had never bought such expensive jewelry before. Then let's eat first. Seeing that this matter seemed to be over, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly and asked everyone to start eating. As for the assistant that he hadn't introduced, well, who would care about her? As Jiang Hai moved his knife and fork first, everyone started to eat. Jiang Hai cut the beef. Daliana, Marian, and Selena Gomez each got a piece of fish. Compared to beef, Daliana and Marian preferred to eat fish because they often ate fish when they were homeless. Fish was much cheaper than beef, so they had been used to eating it. As for Selena Gomez, she purely wanted to maintain her figure. Since she came to Prawalton, her target was beef. Naturally, she also cut beef. Chi Li's assistant's eyes didn't leave the lobsters and abalones when they were on the table. Now that the meal started, she immediately got an abalone to eat. This was a wild abalone that had been raised in cold water for many years. Naturally, its taste was much better than those raised in China. Even compared to those in Australia, it was much better than those in China. Whether it was fish or seafood in cold water, due to the environment, they could only grow for a few months in a year. However, they could grow for a year in temperate and tropical areas. Therefore, a fish that lived in temperate or tropical zones for a year would have to live in cold water zones for a few years. The constant stimulation of the cold water made the meat firm and sweet. In terms of taste, the seafood in cold water zones was indeed more delicious than those in temperate or tropical zones. Just like now, although it was the simplest cooking method, the assistant's eyes lit up as soon as she ate it. Compared to her assistant, Chi Li's first goal was to eat the vegetable salad. However, seeing that her assistant was eating so happily, she ate the cheesy lobster instead. The lobster meat had already been torn, and there was a layer of mozzarella cheese on it. The rich taste of cheese had already drifted in the air. This made the assistant, who hadn't even swallowed the abalone, swallow her saliva crazily. Chi Li forked the piece of lobster with cheese and put it into her mouth. Her eyes instantly lit up. Oh, delicious. The lobster's taste was a little like that of shrimp, but it was 100 times firmer and dozens of times more delicious. Its meat was fresh and tough. If one used their teeth to tear it, it would be a little troublesome. The cooked lobster already tasted pretty good. Now, there was cheese on top. It didn't destroy the original taste of the lobster. Instead, it made the lobster, which was originally fresh, tough, and thick, had an even stronger taste of cheese and milk. It really made people salivate just by looking at it. This lobster is really good, but compared to Jiang Hai's steak, it's a far cry. Looking at the two people eating with grease dripping from their mouths, Selena Gomez also took a small bite and said with a smile. Hearing her words, the two people, who were still fighting over the abalone and lobster, looked at the steak in front of them with some confusion. To be honest, they had already seen the steak at the first moment. But the appearance of the steak, Jiang Hai didn't care about that when cooking. Because it was almost fully cooked, there was inevitably a layer of slightly charred black on top of the steak. Coupled with the black pepper sauce, it could be said that a piece of charcoal was beautified and placed there to deceive a lot of people. Compared to steak, seafood looked much better. Wuxia food was particular about color, fragrance, and taste. The first was color. If the food wasn't good-looking, how could they eat it? Originally, if Selena Gomez was the only one talking, the two people would hesitate for a moment. However, when Chi saw that Pra Walton was about to finish the steak in the distance, she knew that there must be something behind the steak. Otherwise, that woman wouldn't be so interested in it. She temporarily put down the other food in her hand and looked at Jianghai's steak. She picked up the knife and fork and cut a piece of it. As Chi put the steak in her mouth and bit it, the thick lean meat wrapped in the marbled texture and the melted fat inside the steak instantly gushed out of her mouth. The beef was firm, fresh, and tender, and it constantly attacked her taste buds and teeth. Once she took a bite of this kind of steak, it was almost impossible to stop her mouth from eating it. Her eyes gradually became a little blurred. In a daze, she seemed to have returned to more than 10 years ago. She still remembered that her whole family went to the capital with her father. Because at that time, her father brought back a girl, which made Chi extremely dissatisfied with her father. In order to please his eldest daughter, Chi father took her to Japan for a trip. In Hyogo County, his father invited her to eat the beef there once. The taste of the beef was exactly the same as the beef she ate today. This is 5A grade beef? Looking at the almost charred beef in front of her, Chi was full of disbelief. Almost, to be exact, it should be specially selected grade beef. After all, we are not in Japan, but I believe the quality should not be worse than the Japanese. Hearing Chi words, Jianghai also said with a smile. He is quite confident in his beef. At this time, Pra Walton also finished the steak. I think it's time for us to talk about our cooperation. As she put down the knife and fork, she also said to Jianghai seriously. Chapter 265. Oh. I'm all ears. To be honest, Jianghai had been waiting for her to talk about this for a long time. In fact, in Jianghai's opinion, these women were a little redundant. What's the point of having fun? It's better to just do what Mr. Zhang did. How many cows are directly ordered, how much meat is on those cows, how much is slaughtered, how much is exchanged, and that's it. Pra Walton still has to come to see and play, isn't it troublesome? But now, after all, it's a buyer's market. Although Jianghai can easily sell these cows, most places like Western restaurants can't accept more than 10,000 cows from Jianghai, although Jianghai's name has become famous this time. But it's only in New York. No one in the United States or Western United States knows who he is. So if Jianghai doesn't want to sell to the middleman at a low price, and he also wants to save trouble, this Pra Walton must be caught. Your beef here, to be honest, is better than I expected. If the full score of beef is 100 points, your beef can be 95 points, but now it's only 80 points. The 15 points deducted is because your chef is too bad. If I were you, I would have fired the chef. Raising his index finger, Pra Walton said with a serious face. Although she is a bit chinibu, sometimes she doesn't go to work, but when it comes to business, she won't joke. Oh, the beef is made by myself. In fact, if a chef really makes a dish like this, in fact, even if Pra Walton doesn't say it, Jianghai will fire him, but he made it himself, so there is no way to fire him. I already thought about it. Now let's talk about the truth. I haven't carefully looked at the ranch in your manor. I don't know what secret recipes you have, and I'm not interested in knowing. If I want to buy the whole cow, you won't agree, so let's calculate according to the slaughtered cow. After the cow is slaughtered, how much is the meat of each grade? Let's talk about it first. In fact, according to the working principle of Americans, they don't talk about business when eating, so naturally, they don't talk about business. Eating is eating, and there is nothing else mixed in, but Pra Walton knows that Jianghai is a Wuxia. As a Wuxia who has been in the United States for half a year, it is difficult for him to change the habits of Wuxia. Talking business at the dinner table is also one of the characteristics of Wuxia, so she can cater to his interests. If you can guarantee the quality of your beef cattle here, I can buy all your beef cattle. I think you are in this line of work, you should also know the current market price very well. The average premium grade beef is $375 per pound, the special grade beef is $130 per pound, the best grade beef is $50 per pound, the standard and commercial grade beef is useless to me, but I can also take it. After all, we still have places that sell beef normally in Walmart. The price I give you, you can consider it. I will give you a higher price for the premium grade beef, $380 per pound, the special grade beef is $140 per pound, the best grade beef is $55 per pound, the standard and commercial grade beef is according to the market price. I think you also understand that there is no profit in this. Looking at Jianghu, Pula Walton casually quoted the price. After listening to her words, Jianghu also calculated in his heart. Although his beef cattle will not be as bugged as in the competition, his beef cattle will not be as bugged as in the competition. But after these days of farming, he had earned a certain commission for the quality of his beef cattle. According to this price, he could sell one beef cattle for about $120,000 before tax. If he took all the rest, apart from the $2,000 that he had to give to Mr. Zhang, there would still be more than $11,000 left, which would be worth more than $1.2 billion. This was a big deal. To be honest, Jianghu was a little tempted. Wait a minute, the price you said is the price after you want to buy out our beef? But before Jianghu agreed, Qi Li had recovered from the shock and looked at Pra Walton seriously. Of course, seeing Qi Li looking at her, Pra Walton narrowed her eyes and said lightly, I don't think this is a very reasonable price. Qi Li listened to her words and shook her head. Oh. What's not reasonable? Seeing Qi Li directly say that it is not reasonable, Pra Walton was a little surprised. I can't deny that you want to reserve the rest of the beef. Let's not talk about the price of the beef. Let's not talk about the special selection, the best selection, the standard and the commercial price. The price of the special quality beef is a bit inappropriate. Taking a look at Pula Walton, Qi Li's mind spun rapidly. After all, not long ago, she also lived in the United States for a few years, so she has some understanding of the price of beef. As a rich second generation in China, especially a woman, she knows how cheap beef is in the United States, and how expensive top-grade beef is. Compared with most people in China who don't know about the grading of beef, Qi Li at least knows a little about it, although she doesn't know much about it. In general, the special quality beef in the United States is equal to the 4A and 5A grade beef in Japan. But the price of 4A and 5A grade beef is different in Japan. Now Pra Walton directly fixed the price, which is obviously to make Jianghu confused. Maybe some people will say that it is actually good to fix the price like this, because after all, there is beef better than this standard, and there is beef worse than this standard. But don't forget, there must be a ratio between the two, and the good beef should be much less than the bad beef. For example, Jianghu's beef, the retail price of a special grade beef is more than $375. Even in New York and other places with higher sales costs, it can reach more than $400. Especially good grade 5A beef can even be sold for $420, $430 or more. The price difference between these is not just a few pieces of meat. She doesn't know much about beef, but she is after all a businesswoman. She feels that the price above must be fluctuating. If that's the case, what's the price? Hearing Qi Li's words, Pra Walton gently tapped Jianghu's long oak table with her hand and looked at Qi Li with a playful look. We still need to discuss this. Didn't you come here to have fun? Then you don't need to be in a hurry. Qi Li knows that at this time, it is not a good thing to reveal the bottom price. Moreover, she doesn't know much about this manner. In the principle of not letting Jianghu suffer losses in front of her, she still said very indifferently. Well, I didn't expect Jianghu to be a henpecked man. Looking at Qi Li's domineering look, Pra Walton is not in a hurry. Originally, she just gave a tentative price. She really came here to have fun. But she also came here to discuss business. Compared with those who do anything to make money, she is more polite. At least the price she offered is not too outrageous, but since she was seen through by others, she doesn't care. She is not an ordinary businesswoman with a small pattern. She is Pra Walton, the person in charge of Sam's Club of the Walmart family. In fact, Chi Li's skill is still far from hers, but she is very interested and continues to watch. Oh. Hearing her words, Jianghu really doesn't know how to respond. After all, there is no need to make the matter between him and Chi Li known to everyone, so at this time, it is better for him to remain silent. Well, after dinner, is there anything else? Looking at Jianghu, Pra Walton said with a smile. As if the woman who just returned to the Ice Queen has nothing to do with the woman in front of him. He had to admit that the speed at which this woman changed her face really made Jianghu dumbfounded. No. Hearing her words, Jianghu said to her very clearly. Hearing Jianghu's direct words, Pra Walton didn't care. She said hello to the others, especially to Selena Gomez, and then went upstairs. Looking at her appearance, Selena Gomez smiled awkwardly. She is such a person. She is actually a little embarrassed to come with her, but sometimes she can't say it. Well, she is full, but I am not full yet. Everyone, continue. Hearing Jianghu's words, the table that had been paused at this time became lively again. Of course, the main reason is that there is Chi Li's assistant. This girl was really a foodie. Although she was using a fork, which was not her best weapon, she was still invincible on the dining table. Especially after knowing that the steaks were delicious, her fork danced even faster. It is hard to understand how the food is in her stomach. I have to admit that this girl is actually good-looking and has a good figure, but eating like this doesn't seem like it. All in all, the meal is still very harmonious. Except for some small mistakes, everything else is within Jianghu's expectations. After the meal, Chi Li touched her belly that is already a little round. She took her assistant back to the room, and Selena Gomez also went back to her room. Daliana and Marian also helped Jianghu to tidy up and went back to their room to look at the bracelet. Although they didn't say it, it is obvious that they really like the gift Chi Li gave them this time. This is also what gives Jianghu the most headache. After all, in his opinion, he and Chi Li didn't seem to have reached this point. After tidying up the dinner, Jianghu returned to his room and threw his body on the big bed. Then, he rubbed Goldie's head that was not released because there are guests at night. He looked at the ceiling. He has a feeling that this time, Chi Li is very likely to come to talk to him about the matter between them. And according to the fact that she flew so far, it is impossible for her to cut him in half as he wishes. He is afraid that there will be more problems. Chapter 266. Tap 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 tap. The sound of high heels hitting the wooden floor echoed in Jianghu's villa. For this sound, whether it was before or now, the people and beasts in Jianghu's villa were not used to it. The people who heard this sound were fine, they might not care, but Goldie and Xiaobai woke up immediately. Feeling the reaction of these two dogs, Jianghu also sat up from his sleep. It's not that he remembered, but after all, the incident a while ago didn't happen too long ago. Jianghu has to be careful now. After waking up, Jianghu took a look at the time. It was only 10:30 in the evening. Although it was completely dark outside, it didn't seem to be the time to sleep. Just now, Jianghu was lying in bed, thinking about Chi Li, and unknowingly fell asleep. As for the TV, it was turned off. Needless to say, Jianghu knew that it was Goldie who did it. Now their IQ is no worse than the children at home. Seeing that Jianghu fell asleep and turned off the TV, it's not a problem for them. Sometimes, they even help Jianghu with the quilt and so on. Of course, that's in winter. With the current temperature, Jianghu won't catch a cold even if he doesn't cover himself with the quilt at night. What's the situation? Shaking his head, Jianghu was also a little confused. He listened carefully and there was indeed the sound of high heels. Knock knock knock. Just as Jianghu was puzzled, a light knock came from outside the door. Who is it? Although a little curious, Jianghu still got up from the bed and asked while walking forward. It's me. Hearing Jianghu's words, Qi Li's clear voice also came from outside the door. Hearing her words, Jianghu's footsteps couldn't help but stop, but he still walked to the door and opened it. Then a neatly dressed Qi Li appeared in front of him. Oh, it's so late, what's the matter? Looking at Qi Li, Jianghu asked with some doubts. He just fell asleep. You haven't slept yet? If you haven't slept, accompany me for a walk. Although Jianghu's words were somewhat puzzled and complaining, Qi Li didn't seem to hear the meaning of Jianghu's words. She still looked at Jianghu indifferently and said softly. So late? Looking at the sky outside, although it's 10:30, for people in the city, nightlife has just begun, but in Winthrop, to be exact, Zhang's manor, it's already late at night. You don't want me to stand here all the time, then let's go. But Qi Li didn't give Jianghu a chance to refuse. Instead, she stood there and said to Jianghu. Although he was still a little sleepy, Jianghu also knew that he really needed to have a good talk with Qi Li, so after hesitating for a moment, he nodded and closed the door. After about 2 or 3 minutes, when the door opened again, Jianghu had already put on his clothes. The two left Jianghu's villa one after the other. They walked along the street lamp area set up by Jianghu in the manor and slowly walked towards the beach. One had to admit that the night view of Jianghu's manor was actually very good. Because the air was not polluted, walking on the manor's road, one could see the sky full of stars, listen to the sound of the wind, and listen to the sound of the waves being rolled up and slapped on the beach. The street lamps weren't very bright, and the hazy feeling made people feel like they were in a fairy tale world. On the lawn in the distance, groups of fireflies were flying around in the grass, giving people a quiet and comfortable feeling. Jianghu and Qi Li walked side by side here, but one walked on the leftmost side of the road, and the other walked on the rightmost side of the road. The two's pace and breath were almost the same, but there was no trace of the intention to interact. Although such a scenery was beautiful, Jianghu was used to it, so now he just yawned and walked forward in a daze. Qi Li seemed to pay more attention to the scenery she saw along the way. Unknowingly, the two had been walking for more than 10 minutes. The lights in the distant villa were almost too far to see clearly. Jianghu gradually calmed down under the blow of the cold wind. Wiping his face, Jianghu asked Qi Li, "You called me out, what's the matter? Don't tell me you just want to find someone to accompany you to see the night view. This is one of them, but I called you out because I have something to tell you. But let's make it clear first, no matter what we talk about later, you must not be angry." Hearing Jianghu's words, Qi Li still looked up at the sky and said indifferently. Okay. Jianghu also understands that some things can't be solved by anger. Since she wants to talk, Jianghu won't easily lose his temper. The reason why he was so angry last time was because he felt that he was played. But this time, it's in my territory. Want to play with me? How can it be so easy? Let me ask first, did I do anything wrong to you? Hearing Jianghu agree, Qi Li's footsteps stopped. Since walking out of the villa, she faced Jianghu for the first time. A pair of big eyes just stood there, staring at Jianghu, and said word by word. Hearing her words, Jianghu's footsteps couldn't help but stop. No. Thinking about it carefully, although he had a hard time in the previous year, but to be exact, from the beginning, the other party had already made her intentions clear. She and Jianghu are not people of the same world. If from the beginning, Jianghu didn't consider the relationship between husband and wife and didn't want to be a toad eating swan meat, he might not be so disappointed. Of course, this is also a bit absolute. Relationship matters are not like business. It's not so back and forth. If it's really like business, then it's fine. Qi Li and Jianghu are together just to use Jianghu to stabilize the Qi family, and Jianghu and Qi Li are together just for the 400,000 yuan to tide over the difficulties. If he had already thought it through before getting married, maybe Jiang Hai wouldn't be as sad as before. It's precisely because she gave him hope and then destroyed it that makes Jiang Hai the most sad. It's also because of this reason that Jiang Hai wants to get rid of this woman so much after having a golden finger. But now when Qi asked him what he had done wrong to Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi turned her head and continued to walk forward, and then said slowly, "It's not that easy. Can you tell me why you are so determined to divorce me?" "Because it was a mistake between us. You don't love me. The funny thing is that I used to hope that you might look back at me. But you didn't do so for more than a year, so I woke up. You and I are not people from the same world. Since you don't like me and you don't want to be with me, then I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't like to kiss someone's cold butt." "Oh, I'm sorry, this analogy is not very good." Hearing Qi words, Jiang Hai also spoke slowly. Although he recalled some bitterness in the past, fortunately, he was used to it. "So later, I felt that our marriage was actually a mistake. Instead of this, it's better to break it off directly. You can live the life you are familiar with, find a man who likes you and you like, and can help you in your career, and I will continue to live a lazy life. I feel that this kind of life where we don't interfere with each other is what we need." Gently tapping his heels, Jiang Hai said as he walked forward. "So, you made the decision for me?" Still not looking at Jiang Hai, Qi walked slowly and spoke slowly. "It's not about who makes the decision for whom. The main thing is that one of us has to take this step. You and I are together for nothing more than to stabilize the Qi Enterprises. Now that the Qi Enterprises has stabilized, I am no longer an important decoration. As for me and you, apart from the naivety and desire of a toad to eat a swan's meat, the main reason is that 400,000 yuan. I'll return the 400,000 yuan to you. If you feel that it's not enough, you can pay me 4 million yuan, 40 million yuan, or even 400 million yuan. Take it as me paying for our relationship." Kicking the pebbles on the road, Jiang Hai was a little excited, but after the excitement, he remembered the agreement between him and Qi. He took a deep breath and calmed down again. 400 million yuan? You are really rich. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi smiled softly and said with a serious face. "To tell you the truth, if you want to buy my Prawalton tonight, according to her offer, I can make almost 1 billion yuan, US dollars. After deducting the tax, there will be at least 600 million yuan left. If you want, I can give it all to you." Looking at Qi face, Jiang Hai said sincerely. Now that he has spiritual energy, money is actually just a string of numbers for him. Even if he doesn't make a penny this year, he can guarantee that he will make a lot of money next year. He now has such confidence and such strength. "I really didn't expect you to be so rich. I really didn't expect that you would be so much richer than me now. It seems that my mother's vision was really good back then. She chose you to be my husband at first glance. However, you may be wrong. You and I have known each other for more than 20 years. Although there were more than 10 years in between when we went our separate ways, you should know what kind of person I am. No one doesn't like money, but my desire for money can't override my thinking." Hearing that Jiang Hai could give her 4 billion yuan so easily, Qi was also a little surprised. When a man was willing to give all his wealth to a woman, either he loved the woman very much, or he was extremely disappointed with the woman. He would rather use all his wealth in exchange for freedom. "Then what do you want?" Listening to the meaning of Qi words, Jiang Hai felt that she didn't intend to divorce him. This time, Jiang Hai was also a little helpless. He couldn't help but shake his hand and said to her with some annoyance. However, his appearance didn't scare Qi. Instead, Qi raised her head and said faintly, "I want you." Chapter 267. The sea breeze blew through Jiang Hai's manor with a faint fishy smell and the smell of green grass. On the path inside the manor, Jiang Hai and Qi stood there, looking at each other. When Jiang Hai heard Qi words, his eyes widened unconsciously. His mouth opened so wide that a fist could be stuffed in. He really didn't expect Qi Li to say that. What does she mean by that? Doesn't she know that I will misunderstand? Cough, I must be thinking too much. She definitely didn't mean that. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to hide his shocked expression. Then he whispered in his heart, but his eyes unconsciously looked at Qi Li. Tonight, Qi Li was dressed very formally, just like her usual style. She wore a slim-fit woman's suit with a corset waist. It seemed to be a brand, but Jiang Hai didn't know. Inside, she wore a white woman's blouse with flowers. She was wearing a short striped checkered skirt. Of course, this was just for show. She also had a pair of tight-fitting leather pants. Below the leather pants was a pair of women's black high-heeled boots. She looked fashionable, but also had a sense of strictness. Whether you believe it or not, at the beginning, I really didn't mean to give up on you. Although, as you said, the main purpose of marrying you is to stabilize the Qi family, at least I didn't think of having a second marriage. You are my husband, that's all. Not knowing whether it was because of Jiang Hai's expression or because Qi Li was a little surprised by what she said, she immediately turned around and walked forward as if she wanted to explain what she had just said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also turned around and continued to walk with her. But this time, he didn't walk side by side with her. Instead, he deliberately walked half a step behind because Jiang Hai suddenly didn't know how to face her. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't refuse a woman who came to him. After all, he wasn't a good person. However, he had to be careful when it came to Qi Li. His sixth sense, well, in fact, it was all senses. He could clearly feel that he was no match for her. It would never be wrong to be careful. Qi Li didn't look at Jiang Hai at this time and just slowly said her original thoughts. When I married you, I did have some resistance, but it wasn't because of you. It was mainly because my heart was filled with hatred. So, the day after the wedding, I returned to the capital. I wanted to consolidate the Qi family. The Qi family can't be destroyed in my hands. I want revenge. If I let the Yin family know that, the Qi family won't be destroyed. Whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't know, so he couldn't interrupt and just continued to walk with her. I'm not a woman who likes to take credit, but there are some things that I feel it's better to make clear to you. I may have forgotten you, but I've never given up on you, nor have I let you down. In fact, when I called you for the first time, I was also prepared to ask you to come to the capital. Of course, it's not that I'm really unwanted, to the extent that I have to find you to repay you with my body. I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself. If you prove yourself, we may be the most compatible people in the world. Even if you can't prove yourself, I'm not going to divorce you. To be exact, no matter how bad it is, it will just drag on. In my heart, I've never had the slightest thought of betraying you. Qi Li walked in front and kept talking about her true thoughts. Some of these words were good, some were bad, and some were harsh to Jiang Hai's ears. However, he felt that these words should be true, because even if she wanted to deceive people, she couldn't deceive people completely. Only when it was 30% false and 70% true could she deceive people. Jiang Hai didn't know whether Qi Li was telling the truth or not, but Jiang Hai was willing to listen to her. I don't understand why. I don't understand. Even if you're rich now and don't want to be by my side anymore, don't want me to give you another chance, and don't want to rely on me like this anymore, I don't seem to have any restrictions on you. When we were in Ice City, I saw you in that situation, and I didn't say anything. In the US, let's not talk about you staying obediently. Let's not talk about Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, and your 2 daughters. Just the 8 girls in the manor, they have good figures, ages, height, and looks. Let's not talk about you not having any relationship with them. Maybe you don't have any feelings for them, but they have feelings for you. Forget it, it's meaningless to talk about this. It's your business. However, as she spoke, Qi Li's words became a little sour. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little stunned. Was this really Qi Li, that strong woman? Could it be that she was pretending? It's useless to talk about this. I came here this time to relax. Recently, the air in China isn't very good, so I came here to recuperate. Secondly, and most importantly, I feel that we should sort out our relationship. At this point, Qili looked at Jianghu very seriously. Since you don't want me to give you a chance to change your mind, I don't want you to change your mind. Since you don't need me to give you a chance now, and you don't want to change your mind, then let's think of a compromise. I'm not ready for a divorce yet. Moreover, domestic affairs are not as simple as you think. The waters are murky. The title of a married woman is still useful to me. At least when I go to negotiate some contracts, those people who make things difficult for me will be much less difficult. Therefore, I won't divorce you, but you can rest assured that I have no intention of taking your manor and your money. After I go back, I will ask a lawyer to write a certificate. In the future, I won't take a single cent of your money. I won't interfere too much with your life here, but you can't divorce this marriage. Taking a deep breath, Qili said a lot of words in one breath. Then, she looked at Jianghu and said with a serious face. She knew that the relationship between her and Jianghu was indeed a little delicate. It was impossible for her to come and beg Jianghu softly. However, if she didn't make it clear, then Jianghu would really force her to divorce him. She didn't know if Jianghu was afraid or for other reasons. Anyway, now Jianghu was eager to get rid of her. However, after Qi Li's investigation, she found that Jianghu didn't live with anyone else. Secondly, he didn't have a girlfriend. This wasn't because of a change of heart that made him determined to divorce her. As long as no one stirred up trouble, based on her understanding of Jianghu, she was confident that she could convince Jianghu. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Jianghu was a little hesitant. Just like Qili said, Jianghu was in a hurry to divorce her not because he wanted to start a new relationship. To be honest, the only thing he had in mind was Shite Clive. The other women were just so-so. Jianghu wouldn't give up his feelings for them. It was probably the same for the other women. The reason why he wanted to say goodbye to Luli as soon as possible was because he was a little angry at the beginning. Secondly, he felt that he had waited for too long and it wasn't worth it. However, just like Qili said, she didn't owe him anything and didn't do anything to let him down. She also didn't have any thoughts about his manner or his money. At the same time, she didn't care about his private life. As long as he didn't divorce her, everything else was fine. Since Qili had already said so, Jianghu really didn't have anything else to say. She had already made it clear that this identity was still useful to her. Jianghu didn't really want to force her. This wasn't his style. Therefore, looking at Qili beside him, Jianghu sighed. He felt that sometimes he was too soft-hearted. After hesitating for a moment, Jianghu looked at Qili and said slowly, "If you really want to sign the contract, then I'll consider it. However, I have to say the ugly words first. After all, I'm also going to get married. Although I don't have a clear partner yet, I'm not young anymore. I have to think about my own future." Although he was a very stubborn person, but sometimes his ears were soft. Before, Qili had refused to leave, so Jianghu thought that his little secret had been discovered. That's why she insisted on staying by his side. Now, after listening to her words, although he didn't know whether it was true or not, Jianghu still decided to do so. But even though his heart had already decided, although he had already made up his mind, he couldn't admit it so easily. It had to be said that sometimes men were so forgetful. Jianghu didn't think about the disdain he had received in the past and the suffering of being alone in an empty room. Although now it seemed that even if she wanted to come over and recommend herself, Jianghu still had to reconsider. However, if she really didn't want to divorce him, no matter what the reason was, Jianghu really didn't want to be too ruthless. "Phew, I didn't expect you to be so considerate. Thank you very much. I originally thought that I might have to pay some price." Although Jianghu didn't say it clearly, Qili had already understood. She turned her head and said to Jianghu with a smile, The strong and serious expression on her face was like winter snow at this time. This was the first time Jianghu saw Qi Li's smiling face since she was a child. Under the fireflies, starlight, moonlight, and hazy street lights, it was really beautiful. What do you want to pay? What can you pay? Looking at her, Jianghu asked subconsciously. But when he asked, he regretted it a little. This sentence was obviously a little flirtatious. Sure enough, Qi Li didn't answer, but snorted softly and walked quickly toward the road ahead. But at this moment, a low whimper came into Jianghu's ears. Chapter 268. Wu. But just as Jianghu was filled with emotion, a low whimper passed into Jianghu's ears. When he reacted, he only saw a pair of green eyes. At this time, they suddenly emerged from the lawn behind Qi Li. At the sight of these green eyes, Jianghu's heart subconsciously thumped. He wasn't superstitious enough to believe that there were demons and ghosts. However, there were green eyes in the lawn and a whimpering sound. Needless to say, there must be a beast in the lawn. Green eyes meant that the animal had night vision. Although there were no lions or tigers in North America, there were still many creatures with night vision. For example, the largest canine, the North American gray wolf, jaguar, puma, bear, and so on. But at this time, the North American gray wolf had been extinct for some time. Even if there were wild ones now, they were only in Yellowstone Park. It was unlikely to appear here. Jaguars were similar to the North American gray wolf. They had disappeared for a long time. Maybe there were still some in the Amazon jungle, but they definitely couldn't be seen in Boston. According to Jianghu's estimation, it couldn't be a bear, because the size of a bear was obviously impossible to hide in the grass. Jianghu still couldn't see it. So he ruled it out. Coupled with the legends he had heard before, the only possibility in Boston was a creature with night vision and a similar size. There was only one kind, puma, which was a mountain lion. There was once a mountain lion that went down the mountain and was shot dead by the police. When he bought the fur coat, Jianghu still remembered the shop assistant's words very clearly. If there was no accident, then this pair of green eyes should belong to this kind of beast. Be careful. Thinking of this, Jianghu had already rushed over, and the powerful explosive force was used in an instant. Before Qi Li could react, she was pulled into Jianghu's arms, and she was stunned for a moment. This was the first time a man had taken the initiative to pull her into his arms. In the past, even when she was dating in Jianghu, she was always in the position of absolute initiative. Things like throwing herself into his arms, let alone doing it, she didn't even think about it. The two had been dating for 3 years. When they walked together in the first year, the distance between them was half a meter. In the second year, they could walk side by side on the road. Maybe it was because Qi Li didn't believe in men and marriage because her father gave birth to her second sister, so it was really difficult for her to walk into any strange man's heart. In the third year, they would look at the phone or hold hands while shopping. In Qi Li's eyes, this had already reached the point of marriage, but before they could talk, something happened. It could only be said that in Jianghu was really a sad person. But today, her first time was buried in Jianghu's hands. However, Jianghu hugged her quickly, but he threw her even faster. Before she could react, Jianghu had already hugged her and spun her around in a circle, then threw her behind him. Then, there was a bang sound, and Qi Li's butt and the hard ground had an intimate contact, making her frown and grimace in pain. Just as she was about to ask Jianghu what was wrong with him, she saw a ferocious beast slowly walking out of the bushes. This beast looks like a lioness, but it looks slightly smaller than a lion. Under the hazy street lights, it looks very beautiful, but at the same time, it is also very hazy, but because of the night vision, its eyes are green, and the sharp and long canine teeth in its mouth means that it is definitely not a good thing. Jianghu is also standing here at this time, staring at it. Sure enough, it's this thing. Looking at his opponent, Jianghu's eyes narrowed, his body unconsciously arched, and his hands vigorously spread out, trying to make himself look bigger. This looked ridiculous to humans, but in nature, it was very useful. Making oneself look bigger was the only way to survive in nature. Jianghu didn't learn this, but it was as if he was born with it in his mind. He felt that it might be related to the tattoos on his body. Sure enough, seeing Jianghu's actions, the mountain lion, which was originally testing the waters, couldn't help but stop and look at Jianghu with some vigilance. Jianghu also looked at it with vigilance. The man and the beast looked at each other like this, looking for any opportunity to destroy. When the man and the beast stood still, Jianghu also put his hand in his mouth, and a clear whistle came out of his mouth. Hearing this whistle, the mountain lion opposite him was stunned, but when it heard the sound coming from the villa area in the distance, it knew that the human in front of it was calling for an accomplice, which made the mountain lion extremely angry. At that moment, it couldn't care less. Its body naturally crouched down, its hind legs kicked, opened its bloody mouth, and bit at Jianghu. Unfortunately, this guy chose the wrong opponent. Jianghu looked at the mountain lion pouncing on him. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. The first thing he did was to let go of his head. The mountain lion's pounce was very clever. It was equivalent to 3 strikes. The first was to use its body to knock the opponent down. If it didn't knock the opponent down, the second was to use its claws to firmly nail the opponent's flesh. If the claws were pulled out, there would be a bloody hole. This was to injure the opponent and also to stabilize its body. If the claws were fixed, the third move would be to bite. It wouldn't bite other places, but the throat, and kill in one blow. The speed and explosive power of a mountain lion were naturally faster than that of a human. Even if a person's reaction speed was extremely fast, it wouldn't be easy to dodge the pouncing attack of a mountain lion if it hadn't reached the limit. In other words, it was at the level of professional training. However, Jianghu wasn't an ordinary person after all. If he hadn't leveled up and encountered this mountain lion, he might have been able to dodge, but it was inevitable that he would be scratched and be at a disadvantage. However, now that his physical fitness was twice that of an ordinary person's, Jianghu could react. His brain could react, give orders, and his body could follow. His explosive power wasn't weaker than this lion's. Jianghu instantly dodged the pouncing attack of the lion and directly dived under the lion's stomach. Then, Jianghu directly punched the mountain lion's stomach with a rising dragon punch, causing the mountain lion to lose its balance in midair. Its body turned and fell heavily to the side. However, if a mountain lion was so easy to deal with, it wouldn't be a mountain lion. After landing, it scratched twice with its claws and was about to stand up and fight again. However, Jianghu wouldn't give it a chance to fight again. Just now, Jianghu tested it. Compared to this mountain lion, his physical fitness was twice that of a human's. There were advantages and disadvantages. In terms of strength, he naturally had the advantage. However, in terms of agility, explosive power, and speed, although he had some advantages, the advantages weren't very obvious. If he continued fighting like this, he could win, but he couldn't avoid being scratched and scratched. After all, he wasn't carrying a weapon at this time, so taking advantage of its weakness and killing it was a very important strategy. When animals were at their weakest, that was when they lost their balance. Therefore, before the mountain lion could get up, Jianghu had already pounced on its body. His legs instantly clamped on its stomach, and his hands wrapped around its neck. He kept exerting force, trying to subdue this guy. However, Jianghu had underestimated it. Although Jianghu was holding it in place, the mountain lion was still struggling and rolling on the ground. It wanted to throw Jianghu off, so much so that Jianghu's hands, which were wrapped around its neck, couldn't exert any strength. Looking at the dust flying in front of her, Qili was completely dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say, she didn't know what to say. Her eyes were filled with the scene of the battle between Jianghu and the mountain lion. She never thought that Jianghu would be so strong. Suddenly, she realized that she didn't seem to know much about Jianghu. He knew how to raise cows and fish, and he had the ability to get the Walton family to come over and talk about cooperation with him. He could fight with such a lion barehanded. At least, she didn't even dare to think about such a thing in the past. Unknowingly, she had started to care about Jianghu because her toy had been stolen. Unknowingly, she felt that Jianghu had slowly walked into her heart. Just as she was in a daze, two figures suddenly flew past her. It was because of these two figures that she came back to her senses. When she looked at the center of the field, she saw that the two huge dogs she had seen outside Jianghu's room had already joined the battle. These two big dogs, any one of them is actually not smaller than the lion over there. In a one-on-one fight, the lion may not be a match, let alone a group of them. Moreover, there is Jianghu on his back. He wanted to scare off the two dogs here. However, just as it bared its teeth, the big gray wolf, Goldie, had already slapped it hard on the head. Goldie's sharp claws instantly opened 3 wounds on its face. Blood was already flowing out, and its flesh was also torn open. As for the big black dog, Xiaobai, it rushed to the mountain lion's hind leg and bit it. Fortunately, the mountain lion was very smart. At the critical moment, it swept its tail and didn't directly bite the leg bone. Otherwise, with Xiaobai's bite force, it would be crippled in the future. Even so, when Xiaobai raised its head, it still took a big piece of meat from its thigh. A dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks doesn't bite. Although this sentence wasn't absolute, it seemed to make some sense now. Roar, roar. The pain and deterrence caused by the two dogs made the mountain lion panic and roar loudly. Chapter 269. Opportunity. However, its cry was an opportunity for Jianghu, who had been behind it the whole time. Jianghu's eyes lit up, and he exerted force with both hands. This time, the mountain lion did not have time to resist. It was firmly pressed under Jianghu's body. Feeling the power from Jianghu and the two vicious dogs beside it, the mountain lion, which had little strength left, surrendered this time. Other than gasping for breath, it did not move anymore. At this time, Robbins, Bell, Edward Anderson, and all the men in Jianghu's manor ran over with guns and cannons. Even Prawalton, Selena Gomez, and Chi Li's assistant, who had not come out yet, ran over. Especially the assistant, she was obviously frightened at this time. After all, for Prawalton and the others, guns were not prohibited in the United States. They were very calm when they saw guns. There must be something in the manor that required guns. Otherwise, it would be impossible to mobilize so many people. However, Chi Li's assistant had never seen such a scene. She even suspected that a war was about to break out. However, when she came over and found her general manager sitting on the ground, she immediately rushed over and helped her up. Following Chi Li's gaze, she saw a lion lying on the ground at this time. Jianghu and the two dogs surrounded the lion in the middle. For some reason, she suddenly felt that the lion was a little pitiful. It's a cougar. A cougar actually entered the manor. Seeing the animal under Jianghu, the people here could not help but feel a little surprised. Especially Belle and Marin Rupert, their faces were a little ugly. After all, they were responsible for patrolling the border. It was their responsibility to steal fish, and it was also their responsibility to invade from land. In the past, there were no helicopters, so there was no way to patrol so many times. But now that there are helicopters, they actually missed something. This is unacceptable for them. Hurry up and get a cage and put it in. Seeing that everyone was a little hesitant, Jianghu ordered loudly. Boss, this guy invaded our manor. Let's just kill it. Hearing Jianghu's words, Belle's tone carried a trace of anger. A mountain lion entered the manor, this was his responsibility. Now, he just wanted to kill this guy to remind himself and vent his anger at the same time. Don't kill it first. I remember that this thing should be a protected animal. Let's catch it first. After thinking about it for a while, Jianghu decided that killing this guy was quite tempting. Not only could he taste the mountain lion meat, but he could also get a body of mountain lion skin. However, considering that the population of these guys wasn't very developed, and that he had to do business recently, he decided to do a good deed. So, Jianghu decided to pack it up first and think about it later. Hearing that Jianghu has already spoken, Belle and Robbins had to return to the manor and bring a cage that Jianghu used to store Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang. It's unknown whether this mountain lion is really weak or it has already admitted defeat. After Jianghu left, it did not struggle too much. Instead, it was really carried into the cage by Jianghu and others. What do we do next? Robbins asked in a low voice as he looked at the mountain lion lying there alone after entering the cage. Feed it something, then I'll call the police station and ask. After thinking for a while, Jianghu patted the soil on his body and said to Robbins. Then, he took out his phone from his pocket and called the police station. The police station was also surprised after learning that Jianghu caught a mountain lion alive, but according to the police station, this matter was actually not under their jurisdiction. If the mountain lion broke into the homestay and killed it, it was under their jurisdiction. But now that it has been caught, it was under the jurisdiction of the Wildlife Conservation Center. However, Winthrop is not a big town after all. Therefore, the Wildlife Conservation Center was actually located together with the Stray Pet Center. At this time, the center was already closed. Since Jianghu had already caught this thing, he would have to trouble him to send this thing to the town tomorrow. Hearing the police's words, Jianghu didn't care. After saying a few words, he hung up the phone. Then, everyone worked together and carried the mountain lion into Jianghu's villa. Then, Jianghu drove everyone back. It was late at night, and everyone was tired after coming out. It was better to go back and rest early. As for the sisters in Jianghu's villa, they were also driven back to sleep by Jianghu. Walton and Selena Gomez didn't need Jianghu to tell them to go upstairs to sleep. Only Qili and her assistant stayed here. What can I do for you? Looking at Jianghu, who was squatting in front of the cage and still observing the animal, Qili hesitated and asked Jianghu. But when she asked, her face was a little red. It's okay, didn't we finish talking about our business? You go back to sleep, it's okay. However, Jianghu was clearly a person who didn't understand a girl's thoughts, so he just waved his hand and continued to stare at the mountain lion. Oh, I see, okay then. Seeing that Jianghu didn't seem to want her help, Qili couldn't help but stroke her hair a little disappointedly, then went upstairs with her assistant. But at this time, Jianghu didn't consider Qili's thoughts at all. His eyes were staring at the mountain lion. And the mountain lion was also staring at him. He had to admit that sometimes beasts had much better intuition than humans. Although it dared to confront Jianghu just now, at this time, the mountain lion was much more obedient. It just stayed there and looked at Jianghu cautiously. Regarding its gaze, Jianghu was quite satisfied. Then he stood up, went to get a basin of water for it, and went to the warehouse to get a piece of meat for it. This is a real ferocious beast. It's my first time seeing it and catching it, so I'm a little excited. Looking at the guy in front of him, Jianghu muttered softly. He finally understood why those rich people liked to hunt and hunt so much. It was because catching these beasts was indeed something to be proud of. Let's take a look at it before it's sent to town. Thinking of this, Jianghu directly sat on the ground. His house wasn't dirty, and the floor was cleaned by Aphrodite and the others every day. He just stared at the mountain lion like this with wistful eyes. As for the mountain lion, it didn't care about Jianghu's gaze. It was still lying in the cage, chewing on the meat and drinking some water from time to time. At this time, Qili, who had returned to the second floor, took one last look at Jianghu, who was still playing with the lion on the first floor, and couldn't help but mutter softly, "Blockhead." Then, she quickly walked to her room. CEO Qi, did you just say something? Qili's assistant, who was originally a little confused, vaguely heard Qili mutter something. However, she didn't hear it clearly, so she immediately asked. No, you heard wrong. Hearing her words, Qili naturally had to flatly deny. CEO Qi, should we change our itinerary? This place is really too scary. Not only are there lions, did you see that just now? Everyone here has a gun. That big beard is holding a gun. It's too scary. Is Jianghu really raising cows? Why do I feel like he set up a government armed force here? Hearing Qi Li's words, the assistant immediately took a step forward with a frightened expression. At the same time, she whispered to Qi Li, her eyes flashing. Are you willing to part with the food here? I still remember that during dinner, those 2 lobsters, those abalones, and those beef. TSK. Hearing her words, Qi Li didn't stop walking. As she walked, she said with a smile. Then let's have another meal before we leave. Hearing Qi Li mention dinner, the assistant became uncertain again. After hesitating for a long time, she finally stomped her feet, gritted her teeth, and said as if she had accepted her fate. However, Qi Li was too lazy to pay attention to her at this time. She walked back to her room and closed the door. She went to the bathroom to take a shower again, then threw herself on the big bed. At this time, it was almost 12 o'clock at night, but she didn't feel sleepy at all. Looking at the ceiling, she seemed to see the night when Jianghu hugged her and spun in circles to escape from the mountain lion's bloody mouth. Everything in those few seconds was as beautiful as a painting, except for the last moment. That guy is really a block of wood, but he's quite cute. I didn't expect that the hero saving the damsel in distress that I originally despised and thought was the most melodramatic was actually quite romantic when it was performed. If Jianghu hadn't made her fall, if Jianghu had asked her to stay with him on the first floor, if Jianghu had raised his head and gently said, "Are you all right?" After subduing the mountain lion, Jianghu had raised his head and gently said, "Are you all right?" That was such a pleasant thing to do. But unfortunately, none of these happened. But for Qi Li, even if none of these happened, tonight was already perfect. However, while she was happily sleeping, some people couldn't fall asleep. Bang! A glass bottle fell to the marble floor. And Jianghu, who had been trying to win back Qi Li, was now drunk in his living room, and in front of him in the dining room, there were several photos. Photos of Qi Li and her assistant getting off the plane in Boston, photos of Qi Li and her assistant going to Jianghu's manor, and so on. Although there were no photos in the manor, it was obvious that a mature and beautiful woman took the initiative to throw herself into the arms of her nominal husband. There was no need to explain what would happen next. Chapter 270. I'm really grateful for your contribution to nature. This mountain lion is already pregnant. It probably felt the lack of resources in the mountains and the pressure of life was too great, so it entered human society. Looking at the mountain lion in the cage in front of her, the girl standing beside Jianghu spoke softly to Jianghu with a face full of affection. Last night, Jianghu looked at the mountain lion until past midnight before he lost his curiosity and went back to his room to sleep. After waking up this morning, the mountain lion had almost recovered. The recovery ability of wild animals was much stronger than that of domesticated animals, and this mountain lion was the same. After a night of recovery, in addition to water, food, and heating, the wound on the mountain lion's face caused by Xiao Bai had already formed a scar, and the piece of meat on its hind leg that was bitten off by Xiao Bai had also improved a little. Although Jianghu did not inject spirit energy into it, the beef in Jianghu's manor was nourished by a certain amount of spirit energy after all. Therefore, after the mountain lion ate the meat, its body improved a lot. Early this morning, he drove the mountain lion to the stray pet center in Winthrop with robins. This mountain lion would stay here for a while, and then Boston would send someone to bring it back to Boston or release it back to the Alabama mountains. With the current protection of the Alabama mountains in the United States, the chances of sending it back were higher than keeping it. Moreover, this mountain lion was an expectant mother at this time. Today was the best opportunity to restore the ecological balance. This is nothing. Hearing the girl's words, Jianghu smiled and waved his hand. In fact, he had always liked ferocious beasts. In the past, he did not have the opportunity to raise them, but now, it was not easy to raise them. This may seem nothing to you, but it maintains the ecological balance. Hearing Jiang Hai's nonchalant words, the girl also smiled. This was not the first time this girl and Jiang Hai had met. When Jiang Hai had come to adopt a dog, this girl had also received him. She and Jiang Hai could be considered acquaintances, but Jiang Hai still did not know her name. Listening to her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up and look at the girl beside him. This girl is a typical American girl, about 1.7 meters tall. She doesn't look very old, has long blonde hair, and some small freckles on her face. She is very cute. Looking at the girl's eyes, Jiang Hai chuckled and slowly said, "If you really want to thank me, then, let me adopt that brown bear." At first, when she heard the first half of Jiang Hai's sentence, the girl thought that Jiang Hai was asking her out. However, when she heard the second half of the sentence, the girl was stunned. "Get out." Very straightforward words were said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what the girl said, Luo Binsi, who had been following behind Jiang Hai and the girl, could not help but shrug. My boss really doesn't know how to pick up girls. In this way, although Jiang Hai and Luo Binsi were not kicked out, they were politely asked to leave. After leaving the stray pet center, Jiang Hai could not help but touch his nose. Compared to the mountain lion, he was more interested in raising a bear. Of course, it was because there were no tigers here. If there were tigers, he would also want to raise tigers. Thinking about the Arabian tycoons he had seen before, they raised lions, tigers, and leopards for fun. He was just envious at the beginning. Now that he had the capital to raise this thing, plus he had a special way to make these guys obedient, his heart was wild. Just as Jiang Hai was struggling there was a sudden knocking sound from the front. What's the situation? Is someone organizing a parade in the town? Hearing the music coming from the front, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Oh, today is the Poseidon ritual. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi also took a look, but he knew what was going on with a glance, so he told Jiang Hai. Poseidon ritual? Hearing Luo Binsi's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. He really had not heard of this thing. Seeing Jiang Hai's curious look, Luo Binsi explained to Jiang Hai. After all, Winthrop was located by the sea. Because the land was not very rich, from the beginning, the eastern states here mainly relied on fishing for a living. Fishing, of course, they had to pray every year. When the fishing was rich, they also had to pray that the Poseidon would not be angry at any time and would not flood this place. Although when the United States appeared, it was no longer the time when feudal superstitions were mainstream. But sometimes people were like this. They would rather believe in something than not. For example, Catholicism. Now, the believers in the United States can be said to be the most in a single country. Of course, the proportion may not be as high as Europe because there are too few people in European countries. But in any case, the Poseidon ritual was still very popular here. This ceremony was just a ceremony from the very beginning. Everyone in the town would come to the seaside before summer and pray for good weather next year. Then, they would send some offerings, such as meat, and throw them into the sea. That was the end of the ceremony. The reason why this time was chosen was because summer was the time when the storm was the most violent. People who lived by the sea would know very well that generally speaking, typhoons or storms were the most frequent in summer. It was rare in spring, autumn, and winter, so this ritual was also chosen at this time. But in recent decades, this ritual had been regarded as a festival in Winthrop Town. Every year at this time, the town would have a band organize a parade. The parade would start from the town and end at the seaside. In the middle, there would be residents of the town joining in, making the whole scene very lively. When they arrived at the seaside and presented the sea god's gift, the ceremony would be considered complete. At this time, people would spontaneously organize a small market by the seaside. They could go there to exchange for some old appliances or other things that they needed. You could use money to buy or exchange things. In short, it was a flea market. After hearing Robin's introduction, Jiang Hai, who originally wanted to go back, was not in a hurry. He called back and asked Prawalton, Selena Gomez, and Chile if they wanted to come. After knowing that they were not interested, Jianghu went by himself. It was understandable. If he asked these women if they wanted to go to the department stores in Boston to shop for luxury goods, they would definitely be interested. But going to a flea market? It was just a so-so. Let's go, Robbins. Let's go and have a look. Seeing the parade slowly walk in, Jianghu waved at Robbins and motioned for him to join the crowd. Since they were here to have fun, naturally, it would be fun to join the crowd. I won't go. I'll drive directly to the parking lot by the sea. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease leaving it here. However, when he heard Jianghu's words, Robbins shook his head. He was not at ease with the F-750. Although in the eyes of others, this car was just a good pickup truck, in his view, it was only 1/3 of the ranch. It was hard for anyone who wasn't a cowboy to understand their love for cows, horses, and pickup trucks. Jianghu saw that he really didn't want to come, so he could only shrug his shoulders and then join the parade. In fact, the parade was just following the flow of people around. Many of the residents in the town knew Jianghu, but Jianghu was really low-key. He hardly interacted with the residents of the town, so many people knew about him. However, there were only a dozen people who could talk to him. They were the owners and employees of the Italian restaurant, as well as the owners and employees of several supermarkets. That was all. So after he joined the crowd, although people didn't say anything, they didn't communicate with him. The people in the United States were actually not as lively as imagined. If you were a tourist or filming something, they would come over enthusiastically and share their joy with you. But for familiar strangers like Jianghu, they would still keep a distance, but Jianghu didn't care about this. He just moved from time to time in the crowd, but it didn't take long for him to be squeezed from the front to the middle of the parade. As soon as he reached the middle, he met an acquaintance, the mayor of Winthrop Town, Mayor Wallace, who has met Jianghu a few times. Hey, Jianghu, you also participated in the parade. Seeing Jianghu, Mayor Wallace, who was holding a water tank at this time, said with a smile. Hey, Mr. Mayor, I caught a mountain lion last night and sent it to the town. I just saw you marching here, so I came to join in the fun. Hearing the voice of Mayor Wallace, Jianghu also leaned over and explained the reason for his appearance here. Oh, I heard about this from others. You are really amazing, you can catch a mountain lion alive. You know, that is our top predator here. Hearing what Jianghu said, Mayor Wallace also nodded. He also heard about it in the morning. Mayor, what are you holding? Do you want me to help you? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghu was a little embarrassed. After all, he couldn't explain the specific situation of the mountain lion he caught, so he wisely changed the topic. Looking at the big fish tank in Mayor Wallace's arms, Jianghu asked with some surprise. Hey, no, this fish tank can't be easily held by others. Only I, the mayor, can hold it. This is a gift for the sea god. Hearing Jianghu's words, Mayor Wallace said with a smile. A gift for the sea god? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghu looked inside with some surprise. Because he remembered that Robbins and the others said that the gifts for the sea god were some meat and the like. What does this fish tank mean? With a curious mind, Jianghu stretched his head forward, and Mayor Wallace also cooperated with him to move forward, so that he could see more clearly. Chapter 271. Don't say, the distance was too far, the aquarium tank was transparent, and Mayor Wallace was wearing blue clothes today, so Jianghu couldn't see it clearly. Now that he was closer, Jianghu discovered that there was something in the aquarium tank. This thing is mainly blue in color. It is only about 3 or 4 centimeters long, and there are white lines on its body. It looked like a blue and white stripe with 6 huge flower beds growing on its body. It looked really beautiful and mysterious. Subconsciously, Jianghu stretched out his hand and wanted to touch this thing. However, Jianghu's hand just stretched out, and he was stopped by Mayor Wallace. Sorry, I really haven't seen this little thing. It looks really beautiful. If you don't look carefully, you will really ignore this little thing, but this thing looks really good. It's not that I don't want you to touch it, but this thing is highly poisonous. They eat jellyfish as food, and there are many kinds of jellyfish toxins in their body. If you are poisoned by it, it is almost impossible to live because no one knows what kind of poison you are poisoned with. Looking at Jianghu, Mayor Wallace said seriously. He remembered that Jianghu has a fishing ground. This kind of dangerous creature, although rare in the United States coastal area, occasionally occurs. If you are stung, it will be troublesome. So powerful, what is this thing? A sea slug? When he heard Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghu was also shocked and withdrew his hand. It seems that the law of nature is really like that. Those who are good-looking are not to be trifled with. It is a kind of sea slug. This thing is called the blue dragon, also known as the sea swallow. Its scientific name is the Atlantic sea god slug. Hearing that Jianghu was quite interested in this thing, Mayor Wallace said to Jianghu while walking. The origin of this creature's name is the name of the sea god Glaucos in ancient Greek mythology. Did someone say that the god of the sea in Greek mythology was not Poseidon? However, Poseidon was the emperor of the sea, while Glaucus was just a sea god. There was a difference in their levels. According to legend, Glaucus was originally an ordinary fisherman. But one day, he found a kind of herb that could bring the dead back to life. Then, his spirit of seeking death was vaguely activated. After eating this herb, he turned into a merman, half human and half fish. He was divided into 3 forms. The left side was a human, and the right side was a fish. Above him was the lower half of a human, below him was the lower half of a fish, and above him was the human head, and below him was the fish head. I digressed. In the end, he wasn't really a good story. The main myths and stories about him were his love triangle with Skylar the water fairy and Kerch the witch. However, in 1777, when European scientists discovered the Poseidon slug for the first time, they borrowed his name, Poseidon. Over the years, this kind of slug was found in many places, including Africa, Europe, Australia, and Mozambique. There were traces of this kind of slug, not only in the Atlantic Ocean, but also in the Pacific Ocean. However, people were used to calling it Poseidon in the Atlantic Ocean. Because this kind of creature could *ck itself, mate, and reproduce, the population was not small. Therefore, even though this kind of creature was very poisonous, many people were willing to keep it as pets because of its beautiful appearance. Of course, Winthrop Town didn't have so much money. Although Jianghu felt that this thing was quite beautiful, to be honest, he still preferred beasts. Therefore, he was just asking for fun. If he went to the sea in the future, he would avoid this thing when he saw it. He couldn't afford to provoke it. When Mayor Wallace explained the origin of this blue dragon, they had unknowingly walked from the town to the beach. At this time, a lot of people had gathered on the beach, including Luo Binsi who drove here. In addition, there were many people gathered here. On the beach, there were a lot of small tents and tents. There were a lot of old goods inside. These were the things that would be used for trading in a while. Jianghu also glanced at them when he left. Most of them were abandoned appliances and the like. In the US, it was very troublesome to deal with old home appliances. You can't just throw them away. Every old home appliance had to be dismantled and sent to the processing plant. Some of them had to be recycled, and they even had to pay for it. This was very difficult for the lazy Americans to accept, but the punishment here was too heavy. If you were found to be littering, not only would you have to pay less, you might even go to jail. Therefore, in the United States, there were always a lot of old goods. Some people wouldn't throw away the old things after they replaced them with new ones. Because it was troublesome, most of them would be piled up at the door or in the warehouse. If a homeless person took a fancy to it, they could directly take it away. If it was newer, at least some old goods with some value would be sent to this kind of old goods market. Jianghu glanced around. There were a lot of things here. There were old appliances, refrigerators, televisions, washing machines, air conditioners, water heaters, and so on. There were old game consoles and all kinds of things. There were PS, PDAs, Xbox, and even the legendary Hongbai. There were old clothes, down jackets, even fur coats, some cloth, small ornaments, old books, old cups, old computers, and so on. It was almost like a department store. As long as you wanted to buy something, you could find it here. However, the premise was that these things were worthless and shabby. While Jianghu was looking here, Mayor Wallace had already walked to the front of the stage. After reciting a verse loudly, he poured the fish tank in his hand into the sea. The blue dragon that was caught also swam into the sea. With the cheers of the crowd, the ceremony was over. What was left was time to exchange information. Jianghu also told Robinsi at the first time and plunged into the old goods market. However, Jianghu wouldn't let his stomach suffer. Before visiting this old goods market, he specially bought a taco. He ate it while walking and looking at the various things around him. For Jianghu, he actually didn't lack anything. Although Moses Adams was recently filing taxes for Jianghu, he didn't have any income since he took over the fishery last October. He only paid. If he didn't pay, it meant that the national and state taxes didn't exist. After all, taxes could only be deducted if there was income. If there was no income, then there was no tax to be deducted. Jianghu's gold coins were privately traded and were not included in the tax. Of course, if he took the initiative to report it, then the American government would be very happy. However, if the American government was happy, then the British government might have problems. After all, the gold coins that Jianghu salvaged were British gold coins, so there were many things in between. Jianghu wasn't stupid. He didn't have to pay taxes. He didn't have to pay sales tax or income tax. The only thing he had to pay was the local tax. However, because he took over in October, he only had to pay for half a year. Also, because Jianghu raised cattle, which was considered to stimulate local development, this tax would be reduced a little. Jianghu hired more than 20 people. More than 10 of them were locals, so the local tax would be discounted. In addition, he hired 9 special people, so the tax would be reduced a little more. Altogether, according to the calculations of the accountant that Moses Adams found, Jianghu only had to pay $1,723,446.7 this year. Moreover, after the tax filing, he would return $50 to Jianghu to buy pasture and fish food. Although $1 million wasn't a small amount, it wasn't much compared to the $4 million that Jianghu had calculated back then. So, after paying this amount, Jianghu still had a lot of money left. It was enough for him to buy whatever he wanted. At this moment, he was wandering around just to see if there was anything interesting. However, after looking around, Jianghu wasn't interested in many things. He wasn't interested in old home appliances, game consoles, electric motors, fishing nets, clothes, and the like. What he was really interested in were some handicrafts and books. The so-called handicrafts were mainly wood carvings. These things were said to have been carved by the Native Americans. In fact, Jianghu had seen the Iroquois carving them. After they were passed down, they were indeed fun to collect. Jianghu picked some good-looking ones, such as carved eagles, deer, mountain lions, and so on. He bought more than 10 carvings in total. These things could be put in his house. When he looked at them normally, they would give off a very stylish feeling. Just as Jianghu put away these wood carvings and was about to leave, he suddenly heard a shout. A treasure map. Come and look at a treasure map. A treasure map left behind by real pirates. Looking in the direction of the voice, Jianghu saw that the person hawking there was a big man. This big man looked to be more than 2 meters tall and had a big beard. At this moment, he was waving a piece of cloth made of cowhide. Jianghu had seen this guy before. He was also a fisherman. When he went to sell fish, Jianghu had met him a few times, but they hadn't communicated. Hearing his words now, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. In fact, ever since he got those gold coins last time, Jiang Hai had been a little interested in these treasures. However, he wasn't sure where the ships were. The sea was huge, and it wasn't easy to find them. Secondly, Jiang Hai felt that he didn't have the ability to protect himself in the sea. If he encountered a sea monster or something like that, he would be done for. However, being afraid didn't mean that he wasn't interested. Now that he heard that there was a treasure map, Jiang Hai slowly came over. When he saw Jiang Hai coming over, the big man couldn't help but stop hawking and look at Jiang Hai with a smile. Chapter 272. Hey, Jiang, how is it? My lucky manor lord, are you interested in my treasure map? Seeing Jiang Hai squatting down and looking around casually, the big man couldn't help but smile and squat down with a proud face. I'm a little interested. Are all the treasure maps you have here real? Jiang Hai casually flipped through the sea map in front of him. After all, he also has a fish farm, so he also has some understanding of sea maps. Although he is not as good as a real navigator and a captain, at least he can still understand sea maps. Of course, you can insult my things as fake, but you can't insult a great Viking pirate's things as fake. These things were all brought by my great-grandfather from Northern Europe. Not only are there sea maps near the Caribbean Sea and shipwreck routes, but there are also maps of the Atlantic Ocean and Europe. They are absolutely authentic. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big man here said with some unwillingness. That's enough. The only one with Viking blood here is Edward Anderson. He is now employed by the young man in front of you. If old man Anderson knows that you dare to bluff his boss, be careful that he will stuff your head into your X-hole. Just as the big man in front of him was talking, a man sitting next to him couldn't help but laugh and say. Jiang Hai also has some impression of this man. He is also a person who often mingles in the fish market. He used to be together with this man, so he should also be a resident of Winthrop. At this time, he is also selling things there, basically some small appliances and books. Hey, Soren, if you didn't ruin my show, I would have invited you for a drink in the evening, but now, the wine is gone. Hearing Soren's words, the man who was still selling Jiang Hai's sea map said helplessly. Don't, Jiang, to be honest, this guy's family is indeed from Europe. His sea maps are also real, but unfortunately, someone bought them before. The sea maps are real, but they couldn't be salvaged, so, if you just buy a sea map as an ornament, it's a good choice. As soon as he heard about wine, the man immediately changed his attitude. For a fisherman and a sailor, the most attractive thing is naturally women, and in addition to women, the only thing that can't be missing on the sea is wine, because looking at the same scenery every day will really drive people crazy. Sometimes, getting drunk was the happiest thing in the world. Therefore, fishermen, to some extent, are 90% alcoholics. As soon as this guy said it, Soren's alcohol bug came out. Although he is still very afraid of Edward Anderson, the descendant of a former pirate, it is said that he killed killer whales and trained frogmen of the United States, but compared to a good glass of wine, these are nothing. Why are the sea maps real, but they can't be salvaged? Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. Originally, he wanted to leave. Since these sea maps were not real, they were meaningless to him. But when he heard this man's words, Jiang Hai, who was about to leave, stopped temporarily. But this time, before the two men finished speaking, a voice suddenly came from behind Jiang Hai, because it's too deep. Jiang Hai looked back and unexpectedly found an acquaintance, Bob George, the owner of the horse farm when Jiang Hai bought the horse. Compared with this old gentleman, Jiang Hai was more familiar with his daughter, Delia, who was following behind him. Hello, Jiang, I heard that you recently made a lot of money at the New York Beef Show. Seeing Jiang Hai turn his head, Bob George came forward and hugged Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Compared with the last time, this time he was obviously more enthusiastic than the last time. After all, no one would refuse a billionaire, and a billionaire who has proven his friendship. Since there is this relationship, he naturally has to seize it. "Hello, Mr. George, how have you been?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him, "Huh, still the same." Seeing that Jiang Hai still remembered him, Bob George also said with a smile. And behind him, Delia was also looking at Jiang Hai curiously. In fact, to be honest, Delia didn't have a good or bad impression of Jiang Hai. From the beginning, she met Jiang Hai, she was more curious about Asians. But later, when she learned that he had good ball skills, she also wanted to contact him, but she called Jiang Hai. But Jiang Hai never called or sent a text message, so the little girl quickly forgot about Jiang Hai. This year, she was about to enter college. Although the college entrance examination in the United States was not as difficult as the one in China, she still had to take the exam. She didn't consider the school's recommendation because she was not a good person when she was in school. Although she didn't change boyfriends more frequently than she changed clothes, as the captain of the cheerleading team, she naturally changed boyfriends several times, and her reputation in school was naturally not very good. And for the formal exam, she felt that if she took the dance exam, she might get a good score, but if she took the cultural exam, she had the urge to die. She definitely couldn't go to college, community college was more likely, so she was going to find a job in advance. Going home to help her father take care of the horse farm was not what she wanted. Now, if she could get in touch with the billionaire Jiang Hai, it might be an opportunity. At this time, looking at the enthusiastic look of Jiang Hai and her father, she pretended to be a lady behind their backs. "You just said that his sea maps are real, but they can't be fished out because it's too deep?" No matter what Delia thought at this time, Jiang Hai had finished exchanging pleasantries with her father. In fact, the two were not very familiar with each other, so the so-called exchanging pleasantries was just a few words. Compared to chatting with the old man, Jiang Hai wanted to know the story of these sea maps more. Hearing Jiang Hai ask about this, Bob George couldn't help but smile and say, "This guy's grandfather was the first European to come to the American continent, and he is indeed the descendant of a pirate. You know what happened to June Flower? His grandfather was indeed sent here because of pirates. The sea maps he brought are 90% real, and until his father's generation, he used these sea maps to make a fortune." In fact, this matter was not a secret in Winthrop, and many people knew about it. The man's father had once used these charts to exchange for a certain amount of money with some high-ranking officials and nobles. There were indeed some very valuable sunken ships in these charts, which had brought his father a lot of money. But unfortunately, his father was a drunkard and gambler, and later got addicted to drugs, and the money he exchanged for was all used up. In the end, when the man was 12 years old, he died in a car accident, and his father only left behind these sunken ships that were confirmed to be unsalvageable after being sold, because these sunken ships were really too deep. Using some submarines to explore, these sunken ships were basically about 8,000 meters below sea level, and even more than 10,000 meters below sea level. With the current level of the world, it was very troublesome to fish up a ship of about 5,000 meters. For example, the United Kingdom, with the whole country's strength, at most, they could only fish up a ship of 4.8 kilometers, which is about 4,800 meters deep. 8,000 meters was really something that could be fished up, and it would not cost as much money. After all, not all sunken ships were called South China Sea No. 1, even if these ships were pirate ships. But not all pirate ships were rich. Pirates also needed to fight. Even if there were some valuable things on the main ship, secondary ship, and so on, it would be enough to salvage them, but this money was clearly not enough to salvage them. Hearing Bob George's words, the big man opposite him smiled a little awkwardly. It was true, and he had nothing to refute, but his words made Jiang Hai feel a little moved. Others could not enter the deep sea because of the water pressure, but he did not care. He was not afraid of water pressure, and he did not need to breathe, so he did not care about going into the water. The only thing he needed to worry about was his safety. But even if he could not use it now, it did not mean that he could not use it in the future. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai suddenly turned his head and said to the man, "I want one of each of your sea maps." "One of each? What do you want these things for?" Even if you want to collect them, you should want some authentic ones. These are clearly printed. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bob George was a little confused. He had said everything he wanted to say. Did he think he was lying to him? Otherwise, why would there be such a big reaction? One of each? Oh, I just feel that if I put these sea maps on my ship, then take some photos and send them back to China, it would be very interesting. Name a price, one of each of these, how much? Hearing Bob George's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said indifferently. He did not need these maps, but the treasures sleeping in the sea were very useful. Well, the hobbies of rich people are always different from ours. If you have time, remember to come to my horse farm. I recently got a lot of good horses. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not listen to him, Bob George felt offended, so he did not say much. After saying a few words to Jiang Hai politely, he left with his daughter. At this time, Jiang Hai did not have the leisure to care what the old man was thinking. He was still looking at the man in front of him. One of each, how much? Taking out his wallet, Jiang Hai looked at him with a serious face and said word by word. Hey, brother, 17 sea maps, 1 franklin, all yours. Hearing Jiang Hai say it again, the man reacted and immediately picked up one of each from the stall, then handed it to Jiang Hai and said excitedly. Jiang Hai did not refuse. He took the 17 sea maps in his hand and gave him $100 each. Jiang Hai took these things back to Robbins. Now he could not wait to study these sea maps. Chapter 273. Hey, boss, what did you buy? Back in the parking lot, Jiang Hai saw Robbins Garcia smoking a cigarette from a distance. When he saw Jiang Hai coming over, Robbins Garcia stood up and said with a smile. 9 out of 10 American cowboys were heavy smokers. They were different from seafarers. Seafarers were very bored except for fishing and dealing with stormy weather, so they all liked to drink, especially hard liquor that could get them drunk. But cowboys were different. They couldn't drink too much because they had to let the cows out to graze on time every morning, clean the cowshed, and watch the cows, so although they were willing to drink, they were more willing to drink beer that was hard to get drunk. Compared to the boredom of seafarers, they were also bored when they were herding cows, but their eyes couldn't leave the cows, so most cowboys liked to smoke, but they didn't smoke cigarettes with filters. Because of this, it was very troublesome to throw a cigarette butt. Naturally, it was not allowed to throw a cigarette butt in the pasture. A small breeze would turn this cigarette butt into a time bomb. Therefore, these cowboys prefer to smoke pipes. Don't think that tobacco is cheap. In fact, the tobacco in the pipe is not as expensive as the box of cigarettes sold outside. Especially Robbins and the others, Jiang Hai gives them the highest salary among the cowboys. So the tobacco they bought was also quite good. After smoking, they poured the remaining ash in the pipe into a leather bag they carried with them, so that they could clean it up. Look, I got some sea maps. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai raised the stack of papers in his hand. Oh, damn Walter, you dare to cheat my boss. Let's go, boss, I'll get justice for you. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but frown. Just like Bob George, Robbins Garcia was also an old man in this town. Naturally, he had some understanding of the guy who sold the sea maps. If he was just deceiving a foreigner, probably no one would care. However, he was deceiving his boss. That was unacceptable. I know that these ships can't be salvaged because they're too deep. Someone has already told me that. I'm just going to buy these sea charts and take some photos in my ship. Don't be so angry. As soon as he heard that Luo Binsi was going to find that person, Jiang Hai immediately stopped him and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi frowned but didn't say anything. Since Jiang Hai and that guy were willing to fight, he couldn't say anything and could only nod helplessly. After that, the two of them got into the car and headed towards Jiang Hai's manor. On the way back, Jiang Hai kept looking at his sea map. These 17 sea maps were all distributed in the Atlantic Ocean. 3 of the sea maps were in the North Pole, 6 in Europe, 3 in the Gulf of Mexico, and 5 in the Caribbean Sea. Jianghu wouldn't go to the North Pole for the time being. First, it was too far. Second, it was too cold. He didn't have the equipment to sail in the North Pole. Jianghu didn't want to go to Europe. After all, there were too many things to do in Europe. Especially in these sea maps, the original owner of the sunken ship may have some trouble. Because in the special era of the Middle Ages, pirates were actually more of a country's naval forces. These pirates had official backing. They robbed the ships of all countries, but secretly, they could pay some tribute to other countries to get protection. For example, the famous British started as a pirate. After all, before the British, the real dominators of the sea were Spain, the Netherlands, and other countries. The empire where the sun never sets slowly rose under such a situation. Spain and other countries were famous for being shameless. Generally, as long as the ship was related to these countries, they wouldn't let it go. Even if Jianghu didn't salvage the ship, it would be troublesome if these countries found out about it when he was selling it. Then, only the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea were left. Looking at these sea maps, Jianghu's mouth unconsciously cracked open. He now had the idea of going there to play. It was just a matter of time. After all, he had money now, and he didn't have anything to do recently. It was good to go out to play. He had to admit that sometimes Jianghu was an impulsive person. Once he thought of something, he wanted to do it. Now that he wanted to go to the tropics to search for treasures, his heart was beating fast. He was really a little excited. However, he knew that it wouldn't be easy to go there. First of all, if he was alone, he wouldn't even be able to sail his boat. Therefore, he needed some sailors who knew how to talk. Secondly, there was the issue of safety along the way. After all, this was considered a circle along the east coast. He had to be careful. Just as Jianghu was thinking about it, the car had returned to Jianghu's manor. After entering the gate, Jianghu's car stopped in front of the villa. As soon as he got out of the car, little Huang and Xiao Bai, who were playing outside the villa, ran over. Maybe they heard the dog barking. Delina and Marian also came out of their house. After patting the dog's head, Jianghu walked into the villa first. He looked around and found that Qili and the others weren't there. Where are they? Did they leave? Looking at Delina and Marian behind him, Jianghu asked curiously. P.R.A. Walton went to the winery, and Selena Gomez went to the beach. As for Qili, who claimed to be your wife, she went to the cowshed. Jiang, is that woman really your wife? Hearing Jianghu's words, Delina looked at Jianghu with her big eyes full of curiosity. Well, yes, but we don't have any feelings for each other. Anyway, I'll tell you about it. Hearing Delina's question, Jianghu also felt that his daughter should have the right to know about his marriage situation, so he sat on the sofa. Delina and Marian sat on the left and right of Jianghu, listening to Jianghu's story. At this time, the 4 women were having a lot of fun. Yesterday, Aphrodite and the others played all day, so they naturally had to work today to take care of the grapevines. After learning about this matter, Walton, who was originally staring at Selena Gomez, took the initiative to go to the winery and work with these beauties there. Of course, rather than saying that she was working, it was better to say that she was a hindrance, even though Walton was a real rich man. She didn't drink red wine unless it was the best. She also had some understanding of how red wine was brewed. However, she didn't know much about taking care of the grapevines. Although Aphrodite and the others were a little annoyed with her, they couldn't speak and could only endure it. Fortunately, it was all within their tolerable range. As for Selena Gomez, who had finally gotten rid of Walton, she went to the beach alone. Although she had only been here for a day yesterday, to be honest, she already liked Jianghu's beach. The gentle breeze was really comfortable, and the quality of the sand was also excellent. Especially when swimming, she could see colorful corals when snorkeling. The natural environment was very well protected, and it wasn't just the natural environment. Jianghai's beach even had Wi-Fi, which made her very happy. Here, she enjoyed the sea breeze, drank drinks, and played games. When she was tired, she would go to the sea to see the fish. When she was hungry, she would ride the four-wheeled motorcycle back to the villa to rest and eat. This kind of life was too beautiful. As for Qi Li and her little assistant, they were near the cowshed, listening to Big Mouth Philip introduce Jianghai's cowshed. Philip didn't know the relationship between Qi Li and Jianghai, so he thought this woman was a person who came to buy cows. Naturally, he praised the cows he raised endlessly. Of course, what he said was also the truth. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Jianghai's cows were the best in the world. Except for the fact that they weren't well known, they beat all of their kind in seconds. Since they woke up in the morning and had breakfast, Qi Li and her assistant had been staying here. Although in the beginning, because of the smell, they almost fainted from the stench, but after going to the wind and adapting to it, they felt that it was acceptable. This was Jianghai's cows. If it were anyone else, they would have fainted long ago. I didn't expect Jianghai to be so extravagant. The value of this manor and this herd of cows is almost comparable to our company. After getting a general understanding of the situation, Qi Li and her assistant went to a small slope on the lawn to rest. In front of them were Jianghai's more than 10,000 cows. Looking at the cows eating the grass was really spectacular. At this time, the assistant said to Qi Li with some lingering fear in her heart. Originally, this little assistant really looked down on Jianghai and thought that Jianghai wasn't worthy of their President Qi. But in the past 6 months, a lot of things really happened. The person she looked down on the most in the past seemed to have become someone she needed to look up to in an instant. Yes, the total value of these cows is about 3 billion. If Jianghai sells all the cows, the money he earns should be higher than the total output of our company. And don't forget, it's only been 6 months. Jianghai can't raise any more cows in the future. 1 wave of 3 billion, 10 waves of 30 billion, 1 wave of 300 billion. TSK, this is really a place that can lay golden eggs. Looking at the grassland in front of her, Qi Li's eyes were like candles. I really didn't know that our son-in-law had such ability before. The assistant said helplessly. Yes, this Jianghai, I can't see through him more and more. I'm now interested in him as a person and his cows. Chapter 274. Qi Group is not considered a large conglomerate in China. After all, many companies are moving towards China, and there are lots of companies with high market values in China. Look at the Forbes list. All the banks in China are listed at the top of the list. Apart from these public companies, let's just talk about Tencent, Alibaba, Chanda, and so on. Their market value was easily tens of billions of dollars, and the founders who owned a lot of shares naturally had a high share of the shares. There was no telling how much they made every year, but they were definitely worth at least $18 billion in US dollars. The Qi Group's main business projects in the country were real estate and technology projects. Real estate was the foundation of Qi Li's father's business. He was originally a businessman. Later, when he had some money, he started from real estate speculation. Then, he developed a residential area outside the third ring road of the capital. He used more than 10 years to turn from a contractor to a tycoon. Then, he raised funds, went public, and established the Qi Group. As for the technology projects, most of them are venture capital and angel funds. Of course, the returns are also good. After decades of development by Qi Li's father, Qi Group's market value is 17.2 billion renminbi when Qi Li's father was at his peak. The Qi family owns 47.3% of the shares, and it is not an exaggeration to say that Qi Group is a family business. But after Qi Li's father died, the shares dropped to 8.1 billion renminbi, and more than half of the company's assets disappeared. In the past year, with Qi Li's help, Qi Group's assets returned to 16.2 2 billion renminbi. Although it is still far from its peak, it is not considered a first-tier conglomerate in Bing City, let alone in Beijing. After all, doing business is like sailing against the current. If you do not move forward, you will fall behind. In fact, Qili did not tell Jianghu that the real estate business in China is not doing well. The prices of the houses in the city have not dropped, and there is no need to worry about selling them. But it is very difficult to develop them. If the houses are too far away from the city, there will be no profits even if they develop them. This is because the houses are not selling well now. So now, Qili was forced to change her style. In the past year, she had put more energy into business and technology investments. The returns were quite good. Now, Qi Enterprise was mainly relying on these things to advance. But these things were not real. Technology was like virtual currency. No matter how high it was, if it burst one day, it would be over. Qili, who had lived in the US for a period of time, was very clear about the networking and IT businesses. These businesses could make money quickly but go bankrupt even faster. For example, there was a factory in the United States that specialized in producing mobile phone screens. Later, they signed a supply contract with Apple. Instantly, the company's stock price rose from a few dollars to dozens of dollars. At its peak, it even rose to hundreds of dollars. This company instantly entered the eyes of the public. However, before this company could make money, the company had already started to make money. Apple's new products did not use the screens produced by this company. Then, this company went bankrupt immediately. So, Qili was very clear about these things. Investing money in these things will bring a lot of returns. But if it is not done well, it is easy to fail miserably. This is something she absolutely does not want to see. Compared to these superficial things, she valued the business more. In other words, if there is something in the business, it will make people feel more assured. Among all the businesses, the easiest way to make money was selling clothes. But Qi Enterprise will not deal with ordinary small brands. As for the big brands, they have their own fashion stores and do not need Qi Enterprise to act as their agent. Clothes are not available. Recently, the country is changing the price of housing, and they can't do well. Even if they want to act as an agent for cars, they do not have the ability to do so. Then, only food is left. It is said that food is the most important thing for people. Before coming to Jianghu's place, Qili had already considered whether she should get involved in the food and beverage industry. Because of the recent policies in the country, high-end hotels cannot sell alcohol and so on. However, there was still a market for some high-end Western restaurants, especially when ordinary people were earning more and more. A stylish restaurant is indeed a good place to make money. At the same time, Qi Enterprise is actually in the food and beverage industry. At the same time, she can make money and attack them at the same time to avenge her father. This is a good way to kill two birds with one stone. However, the catering business was not something that could be done as and when it came to official matters, it was easy for them to settle it. The Qi family had been in Beijing for so many years and could be considered to have deep roots. It was also easy for them to solve the problem of the shops. After all, their company had a lot of shops in their hands. But it is a little troublesome to find the origin of the raw materials. It is very difficult to sell domestic products at a high price now. And the foreign products are basically divided up by the big food and beverage companies. It is not so easy to find new ones now. So before coming out this time, Qili has also been thinking about this problem, but there is no solution. She came to Jianghu's place purely to relieve her boredom. At the same time, she made a deal with Jianghu and told him about her and Jianghu. But she accidentally found that Jianghu's beef is the best in the world. Originally, she just wanted to help Jianghu and help him get more money from Prawalton. That is why she came to learn about Jianghu's beef. This is also a kind of goodwill to him. After all, Jianghu's beef is raised in the East Coast. It is a little troublesome to transport it back. But as she got to know more, she found that Jianghu's beef is indeed the best. And Jianghu is also raising fish, not only cod, but also other fish, even salmon and lobsters. If these fish are transported back to the country, her restaurant will be very successful. Then, she estimated that her restaurant would definitely be able to make a name for itself. That was what she was most excited about. But when she thought about the price of Jianghu's beef, she can't help but hesitate. It is too expensive. If the shipping cost was included, a pound of steak would cost almost 3,000 renminbi. Adding the cost of water, electricity, taxes, labor, and so on, she would not even be able to recoup the cost of a half-pound steak if she did not sell it for more than 2,000 renminbi. But 2,000 yuan for a steak, although the taste is guaranteed, how many people are willing to spend this money to eat it? This is also the most troublesome thing for her now, but she is really reluctant to give up. And most importantly, Jianghu doesn't kill the cows. There are only about 12,000 bulls. Now that 2,000 bulls have been sold, there are still 10,000 bulls. If she doesn't want them, then she can be sure that Walton will not give up these bulls. If she wants them again, she will have to wait another year. I have a headache. Rubbing her temples, Chili murmured in a low voice. The assistant who has been sitting next to her naturally knows what project her boss is following up on recently. In fact, in her opinion, Jianghu's food is really delicious. She has been traveling extensively with Chili in China. It can be said that she had seen and eaten all kinds of delicacies, but when she came to Jianghu's side, she suddenly found that the things she used to think were delicious tasted wrong. Not to mention the steak, after all, it was the steak that the young master of Walmart had taken a fancy to. Just the fish, lobster, and abalones have a taste that she has never eaten before. The fresh and sweet taste of the deep sea and cold water really made her a little overwhelmed. It is really delicious. If she can feel this way, then the foodies in China will not be bad. It can be said that as long as these things are sent back to China, it will be no problem to sell them at a high price. However, she also knows what Chili is worried about. The transportation is too expensive, too far, and too high. It is really a bit speechless. They sat on the lawn for the whole afternoon. When the sun set in the west and Philemon and Belle were about to go back with their cattle, the two women came back to their senses. I have decided, I want to give it a try. Looking at the blue sky in the distance, Chili seemed to be talking to her assistant beside her, but also seemed to be talking to herself. She nodded with a serious face. Her voice was not loud, but it was unusually steady. But the price. Hearing Chili say that she wants to give it a try, the assistant is a little worried. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If we let go of this opportunity, then we can only wait for next year. If Jianghu's beef is made famous by Walmart, even if there is some affection between Jianghu and me, it will not be easy to get a certain share. The most important thing is that when the time comes, we will not be the only family to sell this kind of beef in the country. Standing up, Chili casually patted the grass and leaves on her butt, and her eyes flashed with a trace of firmness. President Chi, as long as it is your decision, I will faithfully carry it out. Seeing that Chili has made up her mind, the assistant naturally knew that this is the time to show her determination, so she stood up and said with a serious face. Then the two returned to Jianghu's villa. When they returned to the villa, they found that Walton and Selena Gomez had already returned. Of course, the most important thing was Jianghu, and Jianghu had already prepared dinner. In Jianghu's manner, there was never a shortage of delicious food. Tonight, he made dinner. Steak was naturally the main dish. In addition to steak, there was also a pot of beef stew. Seafood was naturally indispensable. 10 fried cod sticks, a large bowl of cheddar soup, Arctic sweet shrimp, braised abalone. Although there was no lobster from yesterday, because Jianghu did not have time to catch it today, these dishes were naturally very sumptuous. On the other side, Chi Li's assistant, after sitting at the table, did not stop using her mobile phone. It seemed that she was also showing off in her circle of friends. However, in addition to her, it seemed that the atmosphere at the dinner table today was even more strange. Chapter 275. Jianghu, I have something to tell you. After a dull dinner, Pra Walton didn't mention the beef to Jianghu today, and Jianghu didn't take the initiative to talk about it. But after Pra Walton left, Jianghu was preparing to clean up the remaining plates and bowls when Qili walked into the kitchen and looked at Jianghu and said, "What's the matter?" While cleaning up the remaining dishes, Jianghu asked Qili, "Can you leave some of your beef for me?" Looking at Jianghu, Qili said with some embarrassment. Last night, she was still bargaining with Jianghu, but she didn't expect that one day later, she changed her mind. She changed from a person who wanted to make money for Jianghu to a person who wants to make money for Jianghu. The change is really big. "Okay, you can take as much as you want, but how much can you eat? Is it for your mother? I remember that the beef I gave your mother last time was the best." Hearing Qili's words, Jianghu thought she was embarrassed to take some back. Although he and Qili have a relationship, Jianghu is not so stingy that he can't even bear to part with some beef, so he said without raising his head, "No, not a small amount, and not for me to eat. You also know that our Qi group is mainly in the real estate business, but recently, the domestic real estate business has not been good, so we changed our business to investing in the electronics industry. But this thing is not a real business after all. There are too many bubbles in it, and I am a little worried, so I recently had an idea, and that is to invest in the restaurant industry." Looking at Jianghu, Qili began to talk. She is indeed a good businessman, and can also be said to be a good politician. When she began to talk, her endless enthusiasm was indeed like a female robber. The trace of hesitation just now has completely disappeared at this time, and she began to talk to Jianghu about her philosophy. Hearing her words, Jianghu's hands, which were originally busy, stopped and looked at her with some surprise. "You mean, you want to buy beef from me?" To be honest, I don't think your choice is right. After all, the price of my beef is a little, oh no, it is very high, and it is really difficult for ordinary people to accept." Looking at Qili in front of him, Jianghu hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Business is business, feelings are feelings, and Jianghu and Qili don't have any feelings for each other. Originally, their identities were more like enemies. It was good enough that he didn't raise the price, and it was impossible for her to let him get a discount. Of course I know that. The price is not lower than yours. I bought it at the same price as Pratt Walton. You don't think that I spent so much effort to open a Western restaurant just to cater to the middle and low-end consumers, do you? My target has been the rich since the beginning. For the average consumer, 2,000 renminbi for a steak is hard to accept. But for the rich or those who like to show off, it's not particularly expensive." Looking at Jianghu, Qili also stared at him. From the beginning, the so-called pattern between the two was different. After all, Jianghu was just a loser in China. Although now he is abroad and has become a rich man, in fact, he is more like a loser. Some people say that a rich man can't be rich for more than 3 generations, because the people who are really rich for more than 3 generations are the family. Although Qili is not from a family and has not been rich for more than 3 generations, it doesn't prevent her from fixing her eyes on those families. Such a price, except for those families, only the nouveau riche who likes to pretend can accept it. Seeing Qili so serious, Jianghu didn't say anything and thought for a moment. "Since you have decided, I can give you a share of 1,000 head, but the transportation fee is not included in the meat. You need to rent a warehouse in Boston and find a way to get the meat back. It's up to you whether you want to go by air or by sea." Now he can still squeeze out 1,000 head of beef, and it doesn't matter if he gives it to Qili. After all, Pra Walton hasn't ordered how many head of beef she has. In fact, Jianghu understands why Pra Walton is so calm and not in a hurry. In fact, it is very simple. Jianghu's beef is too expensive. Now in the United States, there are only a few people who can afford to buy all his beef. And Jianghu just participated in the New York State Beef Cattle Show in the east of the United States, and his name hasn't become famous yet. There won't be a large number of suppliers, so she has a certain opportunity. She has been playing these 2 days and didn't talk to Jiang Hai about the price. It's not that she doesn't want to talk to him, but she is waiting for Jiang Hai to be unable to hold back. Although in terms of the final transaction price, she would definitely not let Jiang Hai suffer a loss, but cooperation was similar to talking about a partner. There is always one person who is strong, and the other person who is weak. Walton wants to be the strong one. Now Jiang Hai gave 1,000 head of beef to Qili, which is actually a hint to Walton that his beef can be sold. If you really don't talk about the price, then it will really have nothing to do with her. 1,000 head of beef? That's great, but we may not be able to buy so many at once. Hearing Jiang Hai give her 1,000 head of beef so quickly, Qili, who has prepared a lot of excuses, is stunned first, and then she is ecstatic. Originally, she thought that it wouldn't be easy to get some beef from Jiang Hai's hands. But unexpectedly, Jiang Hai is more decisive than she thought. 1,000 head of beef is enough to deal with the Western restaurant she is going to open. If the quality of the beef is really the same as the beef she has eaten in the past 2 days, it will be difficult for her restaurant not to be popular. Seeing Qili agree, Jiang Hai also waved his hand. As long as the price is not a problem, it is not a problem, this is not a problem. Beef will not taste good after it is frozen. If you want to eat it, you have to eat it cold. The contract is for half a year. Within half a year, you can slaughter it many times, and you can decide the number of times. In the end, you will be done with 1,000 head of beef. For beef, many slaughterhouses slaughtered beef in batches and then froze it. However, although frozen beef wouldn't spoil, it definitely wouldn't taste as good as fresh beef. Really good beef was fresh and cold, just like some expensive fish. If it was fresh and cold, it wouldn't be a problem even if it was kept for 10 days or half a month. It will be the same as when it is alive, but if it is cold, it must be frozen immediately if it is not eaten, otherwise it will spoil. Jiang Hai's beef is the same. After killing the beef here, it must be immediately put on ice and then sent back to China. It will take 2 days to go back and forth, and it is just right to divide it into half a month to slaughter it. No problem, we can sign the contract. Seeing Jiang Hai agree, Qili's eyes lit up. After half a year of growth, the bulls in Jiang Hai's restaurant have basically grown to their largest state, which is 750 kilograms. According to the meat yield of 65%, it is nearly 1,000 kilograms. Out of the 1,000 kilograms, half a kilogram of steak can be made, which is only 2,000 yuan in total. Besides, in a restaurant, there is more than just steak. There are about 1,200 servings. If she opens a restaurant, she will open more than one. If all her restaurants in the food and beverage industry couldn't consume 5,000 pounds of beef a day, then there was no point in her opening a restaurant. Not to mention impacting the family's original market, even in the capital's food and beverage industry, it probably wouldn't make any waves. Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai thought for a while and nodded. Okay, it's a deal. To be honest, he didn't really want to sell the beef cattle to Qili. After all, 1,000 bulls is not a small amount. Jiang Hai's beef cattle can be sold for more than 100,000 yuan per head, and 1,000 of them will be more than 100 million yuan. If it was converted into RMB, it would be 700 to 800 million. This was a huge amount of pressure for Qili. However, Qili is obviously ready to deal with the pressure. After Jiang Hai agreed, she quickly went upstairs and contacted the people in her company to discuss the purchase of Jiang Hai's beef. First of all, they need a transport plane. They can't afford it, but they can rent it. Secondly, it is the problem of the price. However, it has nothing to do with Qili, and the professionals will discuss it. The next morning, Qili came to Jiang Hai with the contract she made overnight. Walton is the first one to be stunned. Just as Jiang Hai thought, Walton came with the idea that the goods are there, but she didn't expect Qili to interfere. Jiang, this is different from the number you told me. How can you sell 1,000 bulls to her without permission? Looking at the contract Qili brought over, Walton's face is gloomy. She has prepared the money this time. She was waiting for Jiang Hai to give up so that she can sign a contract with him. However, she didn't expect that someone would come out of nowhere. First of all, you're mistaken about one thing. This is my cow, not yours. Secondly, this is my thing. Naturally, I can sell it to whoever I want. You haven't said that you want it, and you haven't said that you don't want it. I can't possibly refuse someone who comes to me with real money just to wait for you. Jiang Hai glanced at Prawalton casually and signed his name on the contract Shi Li brought over. Jiang Hai also showed this contract to Moses Adams, and the obligations of both parties are clearly stated in it. Seeing Jiang Hai give away 1,000 bulls just like that, Prawalton is really anxious this time. Okay, 1,000 bulls it is. I'll take the rest. Prawalton said word by word as she slammed her hands on the table in front of Jiang Hai. It is obvious that she is not in a good mood now. Don't you want to see the bulls? We haven't talked about the price yet. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some surprise. He really doesn't understand this woman. Prawalton just smiled after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Does Jiang Hai really think that he is playing these days? Too naive. Chapter 276. Tut 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 tut. The sound of a motor could be heard in the waters of the Jianghai fishing ground. At this time, a boat was like an arrow that had been released from a bow, quickly cutting through the waves and advancing into the depths of the sea. At this moment, Jiang Hai was sitting in the pilot's seat. He wore a pair of sunglasses and looked into the distance while enjoying the sea breeze. At this moment, there were no humans by his side, only some animals. Boom boom, boom boom. Although it was not her first time out at sea, Xiaobai was still very afraid of the ocean. In fact, dogs were afraid of heights and water. Of course, dogs could swim, but that did not mean that they liked water. There were some dogs that liked water, but most of them were like Xiaobai. They didn't like water. That's enough, your voice is louder than the engine. Jiang Hai patted Little White's head and said with a smile. But sometimes, fear wasn't something that could be understood just by talking about it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xiaobai looked at Jiang Hai pitifully. It tried its best not to cry out, but it still stayed far away from the boat. If water splashed over, it would run away immediately. Looking at it, it continued to lie lazily in the distance. However, its raised eyes and ears meant that it didn't like water either. Unlike them, Dai Teeth and Chiochio seemed to like this place very much. Chiochio was currently standing at the bow of the ship, shedding its feathers. Although it was not as majestic as an adult bald eagle, it was somewhat similar. Occasionally, it would try to spread its wings, but its claws would not loosen no matter what. Jiang Hai was not worried about this. The bald-headed sea eagle's growth cycle was very long. Generally speaking, it would take 4 months for the hatchling to grow into a young bird. The young birds had to be taught for another 3 months before they could fly and leave Rome to live alone. Although Jiang Hai's Chiochio was about the same age, it was congenitally deficient when it was young. Although it had Jiang Hai's qi as its bones to make up for its injuries, it still couldn't fly yet. It needed to be trained slowly, but at this moment, it had shown its yearning for the sky, so Jiang Hai didn't have to worry about it. As for the other one that wasn't afraid of water, it was Bucktooth. This guy was currently sitting in front of the dashboard of Jiang Hai's cabin. He was watching Jiang Hai drive the ship while eating the grass that Daliana had given him before they set sail. He was very calm. Looking at the appearance of his pets, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He had been busy these past few days. 10 days have passed since Qi Li and the others arrived. The first day was the day they arrived. The second day was the Poseidon ceremony. On the third day, after Jiang Hai and Qi Li signed a contract, Prawalton and Jiang Hai signed a contract on the fourth day. The price of the contract was also quite good, the price of the two was the same. Premium A-grade beef. If it was Japanese 5 A-grade beef, which accounted for more than half of the premium A-grade beef, the price would be $395 per pound. If it was less than half, the price would be $380 per pound. The price of the other beef was the same as Pra Walton's original price. After signing the contract, the cattle raised in Jianghai's manor were basically sold out. The rest were cows and calves, but they weren't in a hurry to buy bulls. Now that the manor was equipped with people, these bulls were just right. They had to kill most of the bulls here and sell them all. Then, they would consider buying new bulls. Based on the fact that he had already signed the contract for half a year, he would be able to buy a new cow in October, just like last year. After signing the contract, Pra Walton and Selena Gomez stayed here for 2 more days before leaving. Chi and her assistant also stayed here for 3 days before leaving. They had to go back and figure out how to distribute Jianghai's meat to the whole country, or to send it to Wuxia. It had to be admitted that these 2 strong women were very capable. Within 3 days after they left, everything was basically settled. Pra Walton rented a warehouse in Boston and arranged for 3 planes to transport Jianghai's beef to all parts of the country every day. After Chi returned to China, she immediately held a board meeting and announced that she would enter the food and beverage industry. However, it was obvious that everyone was skeptical about the price of Jianghai's beef. According to this price, Jianghai would have to pay $120,000 for a cow. If it was converted to RMB, it would be $780,000. In China, a beef cow was only sold for several thousand yuan, and a dairy cow was only sold for 20 to 30,000 yuan. It was very difficult for them to accept that Jianghai's beef cow was sold for 780,000 yuan. Although they had eaten the steaks brought back by Chi, they all liked them. However, they were unwilling to spend money to cook such expensive steaks. Luckily, Chi didn't count on these people. Her family was rich, so she just came to tell them. Since they didn't agree, she didn't care. The next day, she directly established a subsidiary company of the food and beverage industry. It was 100% owned by the Chi family and had nothing to do with the Chi family. At the same time, they opened 3 stores in the capital and renovated them at the same time. They wanted to build the best chain of Western restaurants. Although they might not be as good as French restaurants, they had the best ingredients. While both sides were moving forward unsteadily, Jianghai was also doing his own thing, which was to file his taxes. After a few days of calculations by the accountant, Jianghai's taxes were finished. After all the money was deducted, Jianghai was finally relieved. Every year when it was time to file taxes, people in the United States felt that there was a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. In the United States, tax evasion was definitely the most serious crime. Most importantly, the people in the United States almost always relied on you to voluntarily file your taxes. If your tax return was not correct, they would do something to you. Look at how many big shots, rich people, and important politicians in the United States were arrested. 9 out of 10 of the biggest crimes were related to tax issues. For the people in the United States, the Internal Revenue Service was much more terrifying than the FBI and the CIA. Jianghai hadn't immigrated to the United States yet, and he didn't have the intention to do so. However, after filing his taxes, he was relieved. After receiving the tax report and the bill of exchange, Jianghai's mood improved a lot. The money from selling the beef was counted as this year's income. Although he would have to pay a large sum of money next year, it was always good to make money. Therefore, he prepared to take his family out to sea to have fun. Unfortunately, Daliana and Marian were not willing to go. So in the end, Jianghai brought the 4 of them out to enjoy the sea breeze. It seemed like his mood was lifted a little. After sailing for a long time, Jianghai stopped the boat in the middle of the coral reef and the lesser land. He turned off the engine and let the current carry the boat back and forth on the sea. Jianghai didn't go fishing or diving. Instead, he took off his underwear and laid down on the boat. He called Little White and Little Yellow to his side. While basking in the sun and drinking cold beer, he rubbed the heads of the 2 guys with his hands. This kind of life was very comfortable. However, while Jianghai was enjoying the sun, Xiao Huang, who had been lying next to him, suddenly stood up. His pair of eyes stared at the sea behind him. Feeling Huang Jingjing's expression, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sit up and look behind him. Following his gaze, he saw a fluffy cylindrical thing slowly floating over from a distance. What is that? Trash? Looking at the thing swaying back and forth with the current, Jiang Hai muttered in a low voice. Taking off his sunglasses, Jiang Hai looked at the floating thing. As it floated closer and closer, Jiang Hai also saw the appearance of this thing. Indeed, this thing is a fluffy cylindrical creature. Its head is white, but its body is black. At this time, this little guy seems to be sleeping. Its eyes are closed, swaying on the sea. He has to admit that it's really cute. Jiang Hai heard about this creature many times, but it's the first time he saw it. It's a sea otter. Looking at the little guy floating closer and closer to the boat, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up and slowly move closer. Although he has always heard of sea otters, this is the first time Jiang Hai has seen one. In fact, sea otters are the same as walruses and sea lions. They belong to the marine mammals. Although they have claws that allow them to live on land, they don't. However, they seem to have retired the ability to live on land. Instead, they are very powerful underwater. At this time, in front of Jiang Hai, it should be a male sea otter. Although it's sleeping and its body is curled up, it's still very big. It's almost a meter long. Its small nose and big front teeth surprised Dai Teeth. Seeing Jiang Hai stand up, Dai Teeth also crawled to Jiang Hai's side and looked at this guy. It's the first time I've seen it, and it looks so interesting. I'll catch you as a souvenir. Jiang Hai is not a person who is fond of old things. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't like these fluffy animals. As soon as he saw this sea otter, Jiang Hai had the heart to keep it as a pet. Mountain lions are not easy to play with, and the procedures are very troublesome, but sea otters are not a problem. No, just before Jiang Hai's hand touched the sea otter may have felt something in its sleep and instantly woke up. Its small eyes, which are the size of mung beans, looked at Jiang Hai in amazement, then it instantly dived to the bottom of the sea. He had to admit that sea otters sometimes had really quick reactions. The moment he saw it open its eyes, Zhang Zian was shocked. Jiang Hai's hand has already reached out, wanting to catch this little guy, but this little guy didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to catch it. Its body was as slippery as an oily cloth, floating on the surface of the water. But once it entered the water, it was the best acceleration device. It didn't give Jiang Hai time to react at all. The sea otter had already disappeared in front of Jiang Hai, leaving only a black shadow in the water. Little guy, I won't let you run away. Seeing the sea otter enter the water, Jiang Hai didn't hold back and plunged down. He is very familiar with the waters in front of his house. Big Idiot has already swept the area. There is no danger, so he is the dragon of the sea. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.